Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Ruby watched Naruto vs Sasuke final battle. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by CalCypher763 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Valley of the End. The Valley of the End, one of the most sacred places for the people of Konoha. Here the statues of their greatest warriors stood tall and proud with a hand extended out towards one another in unification. Hashirama Senju and Uchiha Madara. At one point in time these two men were the best of friends, but time, a series of unfortunate events, and a desire to change the world to mirror the image they envisioned within their own minds tore them apart. In the end, one desired to become Hokage while the other was chosen to be Hokage by his people. History has a way of repeating itself, it would seem. At the feet of these great figures, two boys, once rivals and friends, clashed. One, the descendant of Madara, sought to leave his village in order to obtain power and take his revenge against the man who destroyed his family and clan. His opponent, the son of the village's greatest heroes, ostracized by everyone for the curse he must bear, seeks to fulfill a promise he made to the girl he loves and admires. Uchiha Sasuke, the last surviving member of his clan. Clad in a blue shirt with the contrasting red and white fan, the mark of his clan, emblazoned on his back, with black shorts and shinobi sandals. His appearance was no longer human, as his skin had been changed to a sickly gray with a large black X mark that covered his face and forehead. Large, fleshy wings had sprouted from his back, reminiscent of massive hands. This sudden shift in his appearance was all courtesy of the curse mark placed upon him by Orochimaru, as a means of enticing him to join his side with the promise of immense power. Needless to say, Sasuke was interested. Standing opposite him on the other side of the waterfall was his friend and former rival Uzumaki Naruto. Clad in his signature orange jumpsuit and shinobi sandals, his blonde hair and facial whiskers had taken on a more feral appearance since the fight began. Tapping into the Kyuubi's chakra buried deep within him, the orange aura had engulfed his form, changing his appearance somewhat as he crouched low on all fours. His anger and desperation for the power necessary to bring his friend home and fulfill his promise unlocked the power he needed, but at a cost to his sanity, and perhaps even his life. Their fight had raged on for quite some time, with each boy landing critical blows against the other. It had taken its toll, most notably on Naruto, who'd lost feeling in his right arm midway through the fight. Regardless, he could still manipulate the chakra throughout his body, and he forced it into the unresponsive limb, feeling it move as he generated the power necessary to begin forming a sphere in his palm. The spinning orb of blue chakra, now purple in coloration due to the mixture of the Kyuubi's own chakra being added to the mix, formed in his hand as he readied himself for his final attack. Seeing what his old friend was doing, Sasuke prepared himself for the final assault. His body ached, and used to the demands pressed upon him by the stage 2 curse mark, but despite this he forced his hands to make the signs necessary to defend himself. Lighting crackled in his hand, a once blue light now turned black from the corruption brought upon by the curse mark. The two boys stared each other down, wondering, hoping that the other would relent and bring this fight to an end. When neither did, however, they leapt into action. Chidori! Sasuke cried out, bring his lighting engulfed hand forward as the cascading sound of birds filled the air. Raise and gun! Naruto bellowed, the sound of his voice drowned out by the rushing winds of his attack. Their attacks collided. The energy was immense and, rather than repel one another, the energy seemed to merge before expanding into a mass that engulfed the two boys completely. The energy merged and coalesced, interacting in a way that would have been seen as odd had either of the boys been paying attention. It soon garnered it as it quickly expanded upon itself, engulfing them in a mass of black energy. The sphere churned and rippled with lighting, the events transpiring within a mystery to anyone who might be watching. Before long, however, an object was expelled forcefully from the mass, slamming into a wall of rock where his impact left the stone chipped and cracked outwardly in a spider web pattern. Sasuke groaned, his form having reverted back to his natural human appearance, the curse mark receding into the small tattoo that adorned his neck. Up above, the black spherical energy still raged with Naruto inside. Slowly it began to recede into itself, collapsing until there was nothing left but empty space. Naruto never emerged. Whether he was alive or dead was uncertain. What was for certain was that he was gone from this world, and where the mass of energy had taken him, only he would know, assuming he survived the trip, that is, location unknown. While Sasuke had been sent back to his world by the force of the energy, Naruto had unfortunately ended up somewhere else. Where he was could not be explained in words. In a way it was where all worlds begin, and where they returned to once they'd reached their end. For any normal person who found themselves here, they could expect a swift end, as the energies found throughout would tear them apart atom by atom so fast that they wouldn't even have time to register the pain before they ceased to exist. Naruto, on the other hand, was no normal teenager, and his intimate relationship with the Kyuubi inside him ensured that his death would be held at bay for as long as the fox could manage. Whether that was fortunate or not was something only he could decide. For now, however, Naruto would remain unaware of the plight he was in as the Kyuubi worked frantically to find a way out. Where the hell are we? The Kyuubi asked, looking around their environment for some discernible landmark or detail. He could see nothing, however. his vision filled with the sight of an endless darkness that preceded the beginning and ending of all things. Already he could feel energies beginning to tear at his own incorporeal form and, while he would be able to last a great deal longer than most, his host, Naruto, would have no such luck. If he was to escape this place he would have to do it with the boy intact, but it was obvious he would find no means of escape in this place. Unless he wanted to wait for something, anything to be breathed into existence, and that was a possibility he didn't have the luxury of waiting for. Time had no meaning here, being only relative to the living and mortal, which meant that should something come into existence it would be at a point of its own choosing, not his. With no other option, the QB receded back into his host and began to look deeper. Perhaps somewhere buried deep within Naruto's own heritage he would find the answers he sought. He pored through his memories, running through the many years of the boy's childhood spent between running around performing pranks on the village and other times questioning his existence, wondering why he had been born without parents into a world that rejected him for reasons who could not even understand. He delved deeper, coming across the image of the fourth Hokage and his wife, bidding their son goodbye as they sealed the QB within their infant son at the cost of their own lives. The QB snarled, his own memories of that night a bit blurry due to the fact that he had not been in full control of his own actions, as well as the fact that what little freedom he'd been allowed to experience had been short-lived before he was imprisoned once more. He pushed through, however, setting aside his own anger at the past to focus on the task at hand. He would take his revenge against the one who had done this to him in time. Until then, he and Naruto needed to survive. The QB dove down further, swimming through generations upon generations, searching for something that might help. The further he went though, the more he could feel the energies of this dimension beginning to take their toll on Naruto's body. He had to work fast before the damage became irreversible. After a few more moments he began to sense something. It was different, distinct, and certainly not native to Naruto's world. Knowing better than to look a gift fox in the mouth, he dove straight for it, believing it was as good a chance as any of achieving freedom. "What is this?" he said, examining the power he'd found buried deep within the boy. "Whatever it is, it had better be worth the trouble." As soon as he opened it up, the power began to surge through Naruto, adding to his own in ways the QB did not quite understand. Regardless, it was useful as he could already sense numerous worlds beginning to open up to them, the closest one not far from their position. Taking hold of the ancient power within his host, the QB latched onto the small thread connecting their current location to that of the other world. Aligning their energies, he could feel themselves being pulled towards it until they were released from this world and spat out into another one entirely. Remnant, somewhere in Mistral, Naruto flew through the air, his landing being softened by the various branches he collided with, as he sailed through the trees of the forest he had sprung out over. Before long he descended to the ground, running along the grass and dirt until he came to a complete stop. Despite the aggressive manner of his descent into this world, his chakra had ensured he was left relatively unharmed. What's more, throughout the entire ride he managed to keep an ironclad grip on a strange kanata he now held in his hand. The sword seemed to resonate with some strange energy not native to this world, and its connection to Naruto was an unknown as well. After a few moments he regained consciousness, pushing himself into a kneeling position as he rubbed his head. "What the hell happened?" he asked aloud, not expecting anyone to answer his question. Slowly, memories of his battle with Sasuke drifted to the surface of his mind. Sakura's desperate plea for him to bring Sasuke back, his heated exchange with his old friend and rival, the ever-escalating stakes that had led to Sasuke tapping into the second form of his curse mark while Naruto had tapped into the primal energies of the QB's chakra. They prepared their final assault, lunging at one another, before his vision and memory went black. "Sasuke!" he yelled abruptly, looking around in desperation for some sign of him. Confusion swept over him as he registered the forest he now found himself standing in. It was obvious he was no longer in the Valley of the End. That only left the matter of where he was and how he'd ended up here. At best he could guess that the resulting explosion from their opposing attacks had somehow thrown him into a nearby forest and sent Sasuke flying off somewhere else. That only left the matter of figuring out where and if he was still alive and unharmed. In the long and short of it though, he knew there was no hope of him retrieving Sasuke at this point. He had no idea how long he'd been knocked out, and, even if it had only been a short while, he still didn't know where Sasuke was or where to begin looking for him. There was also the possibility that Orochimaru had already retrieved his newest tool and taken him away. It was frustrating to think about, and even worse now that he had to return to Sakura and tell her he had failed to keep his promise. He clenched his hands in anger, and that's when he noticed something odd. There, clutched in his right hand, was a katana. He looked at it, puzzled by what he saw. While katanas weren't often used by shinobi, they were considered part of the arsenal used by his people. The Umbu, for one, were well known for carrying these swords and even shorter variations of them, but Naruto had never seen the appeal. His ninja tools had always been more than enough, with other items such as the windmill shuriken being used on occasion when the need arose. This one, however, looked more like something the samurai in the country to the north used. It was long, about half Naruto's height, and had a distinct four-pointed star cross-guard on the hilt. A strange energy seemed to emanate from it, and strangely enough, Naruto thought he could sense it calling out to him, almost as if it could sense him just as much as he sensed it. Shaking his head, he figured the flight and landing must have done some damage to his head, and he quickly headed towards the sound of running water to splash some in his face. It didn't take him long to find a small stream emptying out into a small lake, and Naruto eagerly walked towards it. The moment his reflection came into view, he nearly stumbled over in confusion. Approaching slowly, he took in the image he saw before him, unsure of what he saw. His cloth had been burned around the edges, with the legs of his pants and sleeves of his shirt completely gone and blackened around the edges of his knees and elbows. They seemed to be a bit smaller as well, as if Naruto had grown a few inches within the time he was unconscious. But that wasn't what garnered his attention. His hair, set right above his headband which was hanging on by a few surviving threads, had changed color. No longer the signature blonde, it had darkened, turning a strange shade of orange, think Ichigo from Bleach. Most of his other features had remained the same, however, his body was more lean and his shoes smaller. Something had happened, something he wasn't conscious for. He wouldn't be getting any answers anytime soon, however, as the adrenaline which had been keeping him going had run its course, and suddenly he felt all his energy fade from him. He collapsed to the ground, his headband finally snapping off the last few threads and landing in the dirt next to him, light reflecting off the forehead protector. His grip on his katana remained firm, though whether that was by Naruto's own desire to maintain a hold on it or the sword's, one couldn't quite say. He remained there, unconscious on the ground, until 3 men in dirty, ragged clothing emerged from the forest. Their skin was tanned from time spent in the sun, and the weapons, both blades and guns, they wielded showed significant use and in desperate need of repair. They had been watching Naruto for some time, having witnessed his destructive entrance into the forest, and now regarded him from the outskirts with obvious trepidation. After a while, however, they decided it was safe enough to approach, and slowly they made their way over to him. They crept cautiously forward, none of them too eager to approach, especially when he still had a firm grip on that expensive-looking sword. Once they were standing right over him, however, they felt safe enough to inspect their prize. "Think he's dead?" one of them asked. "Nah, you idiot, he's still breathing." "Don't call me an idiot. Then don't ask stupid questions." "Shut up, both of you," the third man said as he crouched over Naruto. "Who do you think he is? Huntsman maybe, from Haven? What makes you say that?" "The sword, obviously. What kind of person could afford something like that, and not be huntsman trained or training? He's young enough to be in one of the academies." "Then what was he doing flying through the trees?" "I don't know. Maybe he fell out of a bullhead or something. We would have heard it flying overhead," the crouched man pointed out. "Whatever he is, I like that sword. I think I'll inspect it a little." He reached out, attempting to wrest it from Naruto's hands. He didn't get much of a chance before the sword sent a sharp jolt of energy coursing through his arm. The man stumbled backwards, crying out in shock and pain as he clutched his arm. "Son of a bitch! What happened? Damn thing must be booby-trapped. I guess that confirms he's a huntsman. So what do we do now? What do you think?" "Grab him and his stuff, we're taking him back to camp. Raven will be interested in him as well." Grumbling their complaints but otherwise doing as they were told, the 2 men picked up Naruto between them while the third grabbed the stuff which fell from his body and took point back to camp. Today was certainly turning out to be interesting. "Mistral, Branwen tribe encampment. I sent you out to gather supplies and instead you bring me back a boy. Explain." Raven sat with the 3 bandits standing at attention in her tent and Naruto, still unconscious, laying on the floor with his items placed atop him and the katana still clutched firmly in his hand. Raven's tent was adorned with items taken from various raids, some of them looking to be quite expensive while others appeared to have sentimental value. Raven herself sat upon a simple camping chair, certainly not a throne by any means, but the imposing image the former huntress cut was enough to make the thing appear regal in her presence. Behind her stood a young girl, a little older than Naruto, with short brown hair and an intricate raven tattoo on her arm. Her face was stoic, giving away nothing, as compared to the bandits who knelt before them and looked very nervous. They had every reason to be. "We saw him fall out of the sky," one of them began. "You saw him fall out of the sky," Raven repeated in a mocking tone. "Yes, he came flying out of the sky and crashed through the trees. We followed him to the lack where we found him collapsed. We think he might be a huntsman from Haven or Beacon," he said, the latter word causing Raven's eyes to narrow dangerously. "And we thought he might be of interest to you. He's wearing some strange clothes and his weapons are like nothing we've ever seen before." True to their words, the bandits had taken the liberty of rummaging through his pockets. They'd found them mostly empty save for the satchel he kept strapped to his back hip. Some of the things they showed her Raven recognized from her travels. Throwing stars, smoke pellets, and a few other items that she was unfamiliar with. What truly caught her eye was the katana he'd kept such a firm grip on the entire time. While not as long as her own, it was still intriguing nonetheless, and no doubt came with a unique story to it as well. "I see you left him with his weapon." "Why? We haven't had much luck removing it," their leader piped up, rubbing his arm with a grimace that spoke of an unpleasant memory. "We think he may have booby-trapped it to prevent anyone from taking it away while he slept." "Is that so?" Raven asked quizzically. Intrigued, Raven glanced down at the weapon in the boy's hands. Slowly, she reached out her own hand, ready to leap back at a moment's notice should something pop off or spring out in reaction to her meddling. When her fingers were just inches from the hilt she felt a reaction, and not something she had expected. Her maiden powers flared within her, the energy rising in a manner meant to protect her from harm. The fact that they were doing this on instinct told her something less than accommodating was waiting for her should she make contact with the sword, and she decided to leave it be. I see, she said, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. Place him on the bed and leave, she instructed. The bandits did as they were told, gently lifting and deposing Naruto on the mattress before exiting the large tent. Only their leader remained, his eyes wavering on the sword. He obviously wanted it, but something, fear perhaps, kept him from reaching out and taking it. His desire to claim it for himself won out, however, and he slowly reached out his hand to take it. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Raven said, watching him intently. Is that a no, ma'am? He asked, obviously concerned that he may be treading on unwelcome territory by taking something she considered hers. No, it's more helpful advice. You may take the sword, but you may not like what it takes from you. The bandit stared at her, puzzled at her cryptic words, before glancing back down at the sword. While the memory of what had happened flashed through his mind, he ignored it. Here, in the Branwen tribe, the strong prevailed and the weak died. He wasn't weak. If he were weak, he wouldn't be able to handle the sword. He was strong enough to work through the pain and claim it as his own. He reached out once more, foregoing all subtlety as he gripped the hilt and attempted to wrest it from Naruto's grip. He didn't get very far. Without warning, a sheet of ice erupted around his fingers and wrist, encasing them in a cold prison. Pain shot through his hand as he stumbled back. The ice slowly dissipated the further he drew away from the sword, but the pain remained, a constant reminder of his foolishness. He quickly ran from the tent, Raven watching his hasty exit with an amused smile on her face. Her glance soon returned to the boy, still unconscious despite the botched attempt to relieve of his weapon, but otherwise unharmed. Certainly they had brought her someone interesting. Ma'am, what just happened? The young woman asked. I'm not quite sure myself, Vernal, Raven replied. Do you think it was a booby trap just like he said? I doubt it. I've never heard of a device small enough to conceal ice dust inside a sword's hilt, nor have I ever seen ice dust react that way. If you noticed, it didn't touch the boy and reacted only to the man touching it, but melted soon after he relented. Maybe it's his semblance, Vernal suggested. Perhaps. We'll have to wait until our young guest wakes up to find out. Why don't you go get him something to eat and drink? I'm sure he'll be famished when he wakes. Sparring a quick, curious glance in the boy's direction, Vernal left the tent in pursuit of the cooks to grab what food she could. Once she was gone, Raven fixed her own gaze on the boy, curious and intrigued in equal measure. Interesting indeed. Naruto awoke some time later, his head throbbing. He groaned, clutching his head as he willed the pain away. It was strange in that it wasn't the same as a headache or migraine, but somehow it caused him great discomfort. Slowly, the throbbing receded, but somewhere in the back of his mind he could still feel it, like it had retreated in preparation for another assault. Whatever had caused it, he would have to establish later. For now he needed to figure out where he was. The last thing he could recall, he made a hard landing in a forest before making his way to a nearby lake. There he'd found his reflection had changed, or rather that he himself had changed a great deal. After that he'd fallen unconscious and now had woken up in what he could see was a rather large tent. Unlike the ones he'd used while on a mission, this one was built to accommodate a large number of people, something that was usually meant to be used as a meeting hall or makeshift hospital. This one showed signs of having been lived in, if the furniture and numerous other items that were stacked around him were any indication. He himself was laid out on a large bed with his bag of ninja tools and his forehead protector sitting on the small nightstand next to him. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he was once more surprised to find the strange katana still clutched firmly in his hands. He wasn't quite sure what to make of it, but his thoughts were quickly directed elsewhere when he heard someone cough loudly. You're awake, she said. Naruto blinked a few times, allowing his eyes to adjust enough to make out the woman sitting across the room from him. She was older, possibly around Kakashi-sensei's age if he was being honest, though he'd never seen the man without his signature mask on. She had long raven black hair that came down to the middle of her back and piercing red eyes that stared at him with intrigue. The yukata she wore matched her eyes, and she wore a complimentary pair of black shorts along with them and black boots that came up her thigh and stopped just short of her knees. Strapped to her hip was a large cylindrical device from which he could see the handle of a katana protruding from it and numerous colored vials set within the machine itself. It was a curious sight, as was she, and both were clues that he wasn't anywhere near Konoha or the Land of Fire for that matter. I take it you're the one who rescued me? He asked, his throat raw and dry. In a manner of speaking. It was actually some of my men who found you. You apparently came flying out of the sky before crashing through some tress and collapsed beside a lake. Any of this sound familiar? It does, actually, he replied, recalling his time at the lake and the moment he'd woken up after being reacquainted with the ground. Where am I? He asked. You're at our camp. This is the Branwen tribe and I am their leader, Raven Branwen, she said proudly. Humble as well, he remarked with a note of sarcasm. Raven merely laughed, amused by his comment rather than offended. Are you hungry? Before he could answer, Naruto's stomach growled loudly. She laughed again, somehow seeming relaxed while never dropping her guard, a rare ability that not many people could master. Vernal, see to our guest. At the mention of her name, a young woman about his age stepped into the tent holding a plate stacked high with food and a large jug of water. She had short brown hair and slightly tanned skin from being out in the sun. On her arm he could see adorned there an intricate tattoo of a large bird, a raven perhaps, over a flower. Her cloths looked tattered and worn, with one of her pant legs being cut off just above her knee. Her face was unreadable, but the look in her eyes told him she held no affection towards him. He decided it was best not to antagonize the scary-looking girl, especially when he felt so weak, and offered her his silent thanks as he took the food and water before draining the jug of its contents. His throat sang with relief as it was caressed by the cool liquid. As soon as he was done he looked across the room at the two women who were gazing back with a mixture of surprise and amusement to his reaction. "Thirsty?" Raven asked with a smirk. "A bit," he replied. "Well, seeing as how you're refreshed now, would you mind telling me how you got here?" Naruto took a moment to collect his thoughts before recounting the events that had led him here. He was conscious enough to leave out the parts of him being tied to a demon fox spirit, but otherwise he recited everything to the letter. In regards to how he had managed to end up in a forest of all places he wasn't quite sure, nor as to why his appearance had changed so much since he'd last been awake. Raven watched him with an unreadable expression, while Vernos became more and more confused by the minute. She would steal the occasional glance down at her mentor, but when she made no sign that she had noticed, she would return to listening to Naruto, just as confused as she was before. When he was finished he waited for their own explanation. Verno was the first to speak. "You honestly expect us to believe that you're some ninja dash?" "Shinobi," Naruto corrected. "Whatever, shinobi who used a ball of wind, Chidori, using some sort of energy, chakra, against your best friend who was using lightning, and the backlash from your attacks meeting each other sent you flying through the air and into the forest? That's the best theory I can come up with given the evidence." "Right," Verno said, taking a moment to think before adding, "Just how hard did you hit your head?" "What do you mean? What do I mean?" Verno asked, exasperated. "Your story makes too damn sense, that's what I mean." "What? How? You honestly expect me to believe you're some ninja, shinobi? I don't give a fuck," she bellowed, causing him to flinch in surprise. "Ninjas don't exist. Your whole story is a load of shit. How do you not know about shinobi? We have villages in nearly every country, too, in some. You're obviously delusional." "Makes sense though, given what they teach you at the academies." "Academies?" "Yeah, the huntsman academies." "What's a huntsman?" Naruto asked, his turn to be confused. Verno growled, her temper having reached its peak as she made to walk over and punch his teeth out. She was stopped by Raven, who threw her hand out in front of her, the unreadable expression she wore having never faltered. "He's telling the truth," she said. "Raven? Or at least, he believes he's telling the truth," she stated, rising from her chair to walk across the room. Naruto shifted uncomfortably in his chair as the woman came to stand over him. Even when she was sitting she had cut an imposing figure, and now she looked far more intimidating than he'd first thought. Taking his chin between her thumb and forefinger, she looked into eyes, searching for something he wasn't aware of. After a long silence she released her grip, a smirk spreading across her face. "He is certainly an interesting one," she remarked. "Eat you fill and get some rest. Tomorrow we'll give you a tour of the camp and find out just how skilled you are with that sword of yours," she said, pointing to his katana before exiting the tent with Verno close behind. Naruto watched them leave, curious to find out what had elicited that outburst from Verno, but decided to leave it for the morning. He instead turned his attention to the plate of food she'd brought, which he was pleased to see had an assortment of fruits, vegetables, and meats. Eating his fill, he settled himself back down on the bed and felt his exhaustion overtaking him once more. All the while the katana had remained firmly in his grip, but he paid it little attention, more concerned with sleep as well as having a conversation with someone, or rather something, who might just have the answers he so desperately needed. Naruto had only been inside the dark, dank realm that acted as the Kyuubi's prison within his soul a few times. While not a physical place, the connection each of them had to their respective chakras enabled them to interact with one another, ensuring that Naruto was standing a good ways back from the bars that separated them both. His feet were buried within ankle-deep water as he gazed up at the massive fox, the creature laying down in a relaxing pose, never paying much mind to its visitor. Naruto steeled himself, knowing he had to be stern and confident when speaking with the demon fox. Any show of weakness could prove fatal, and right now he needed answers. "Hey Kyuubi, wake up," he shouted. The creature lazily cracked open an eye, regarding Naruto as one might an ant that had crawled up on its plate. "I need answers," he said. The fox said, closing its eye as it ignored its host's demands. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he yelled. "I'm more than aware of that fact," it answered lazily. "What happened during my fight with Sasuke?" "I don't remember anything, which means you must have done something." "What happened?" "I might have done something, but you'll have to do something in return," the creature replied. "And what might that be?" "A thank you." "What?" "A proper thank you, for saving your worthless life." "Why should I thank you? You've been oddly silent ever since we got here, wherever this is. What exactly did you do anyway?" "I saved us from being torn to shreds by forces so powerful and ancient your puny mind can't even comprehend them," the fox growled at him. "Thanks to your foolishness we were thrust from our world and nearly killed as a result. Now, while I don't relish the fact that I'm to remain a part of you for the foreseeable future, I will at least settle for a proper thank you." Naruto stared up at the creature, mouth agape, while its expression remained uninterested and lazy. Knowing that he would say nothing until he complied, Naruto slowly bowed himself forward. When he raised his head once more, the fox's expression remained unchanged, though there was an amused spark in its eye, as if it had not expected him to go so far but was nonetheless pleased. Do you know what happened when your attack and Sasuke's collided? Not really. I blacked out when it happened. I'm not surprised. The energies meshed together, enough to force your friend back and knock him unconscious. Were it not for me being in your body, you might have had the same thing happen to you as well, though I doubt you would have survived. Naruto felt his stomach plummet. Whatever complaints he might have had regarding his unwarranted relationship with the Kyuubi, he was at least grateful that it had managed to keep him alive and unscathed. He could only imagine what might have happened to him otherwise. When the energy dissipated, it took us with it, and emptied us into the dimension of beginnings and endings. Essentially, it's where every world is born and where they eventually return to once they've reached their end. Oh, so like an afterlife of sorts? Basically. We were trapped there for some time, the energies nearly tearing you and I apart. I managed to find a way to pull us from that dimension and send us here. Yeah, but how? It would be difficult enough to explain, but, essentially, I had to reach deep within you to find the means to exit that plane. Thankfully your family had an ancient power tucked away, something I had not encountered before. It's interesting that it would take the form of that sword. At the mention of a sword, Naruto glanced down at his hand and was astonished to see he was holding the katana. Even in this place it still looked the same, only it had a strange glow about it, like it was radiating energy of some kind. Stranger still, he swore he could hear something. It was faint and difficult to make out, but it sounded almost like a disembodied voice, calling out his name. Something was inside of it, but he wasn't sure what. What is this thing? How should I know? It came from your family line, not mine, the Kyuubi replied. Ugh, well, thanks for the help anyway. Now I just need to figure out where this place is and how I'm supposed to get back home. Good luck with that, the fox replied before adding, watch out for that raven woman. Why? I can't be sure, but I sense an odd power radiating from her body. I can sense something similar from everyone else, but it seems like a natural part of them, so I've ignored it mostly. With her, however, it feels ancient for some reason and completely foreign to her body. I'd watch what I say or do around her. There's no telling what she's capable of. Thanks for the tip, Naruto said gratefully. Don't read into it too much, kid. I'm simply warning so I don't get caught in the crossfire of your own stupidity, the Kyuubi replied before closing its eye and returning to his rest. You'll be expected to work and prove your worth while you're here, Raven instructed as she led Naruto through the makeshift camp. Naruto looked around, unimpressed by the sight that greeted him. Tents of various colors and fabrics were set up with no thought to their location or their neighbors. As far as he could see, so long as they were within the boundary of the large wall they had erected, they were safe enough anywhere. Amongst the tents he could see broken crates, barrels, and chests, some filled with various items. Having learned that he'd been rescued by bandits earlier that morning, it wasn't difficult for him to assume that the items they owned were trophies pilfered from their victims. Another thing that became blatantly obvious to him was the camp's temperament towards him. None of the faces he had seen were at all friendly, with the kinder expressions being little more than a frown. He even recognized one of the men who'd brought him to the camp, a young guy a few years older than himself with blonde hair and barely visible stubble. The moment he locked eyes with Naruto he scowled, turning away while clutching at his arm for some odd reason. We have a philosophy here. The strong survive and the weak die. That's a bit dismal, don't you think? He asked. It's simply the truth of things. Those who are strong are meant to survive while those who are weak are fated to be brushed aside. But shouldn't those who are strong lend their strength to those who are weak? Why not even help the weak to become strong? Raven stopped, turning to regard Naruto with a critical eye. That sounds awfully similar to something they teach at the huntsman academies. Out here, such things are unwelcome. You either adhere to the codes we set or you leave and strike out on your own. Your choice. Naruto was hesitant for a moment. While he didn't agree with everything Raven had told him, he also knew he probably wouldn't be alive if not for the intervention of her and her bandits. Not only that, but his knowledge of this world was horribly lacking, ensuring that if he stepped outside of this encampment with the intent to find his own way, he'd be effectively feeling his way through the dark as he struggled to make sense of their culture. After a while he conceded, nodding to Raven in acknowledgement. The older woman smiled, pleased with his answer before stepping into a large area cordoned off with a makeshift wooden fence. Let's test your ability, and see if you're strong or weak, she said. The moment he stepped inside, he realized what this was. Considering the layout, as well as the fact that most of the encampment had gathered around to watch, it was obvious this was a training arena of some sort. It made sense, given the fact that they would be expected to fight in order to defend themselves or, more accurately, overpower anyone they intended to steal from. Raven had walked to the opposite side of the arena, removing her katana from its scabbard. The metal made a loud sound as it was removed and Naruto couldn't help but stare at the length of the blade. It was longer than any normal katana he'd seen and looked difficult to wield, but from the way Raven held herself, Naruto could see she was well seasoned with the weapon. Now show me how well you handle your sword, she commanded. I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I have no idea how to use a katana really, he admitted. Is that so? Then why carry it with you if you have no ability to use it? Would you believe me if I said I'd never owned it until yesterday? He asked. Perhaps. Regardless, I still expect you to fight. Now show me whatever skills you have. Your objective is to either throw me from the ring, knock me out, or force me to surrender. Just so you're aware, the last option won't happen no matter what you do. We'll see, Naruto said. Without waiting for anyone to call the fight, Naruto reached into his hip bag and removed a shuriken from inside. He threw it almost immediately, trusting the surprise attack to catch her off guard just long enough for him to produce a few shadow clones. Raven proved more adept than he'd anticipated as the shuriken pinged uselessly off the flat of her blade before she lunged forward, closing the distance in a matter of seconds. She followed up with a diagonal slash, watching as Naruto's surprised expression was cut in two. Bystanders all around cheered Raven on, but their cheers were silenced when his form disappeared in a plume of smoke, leaving everyone, Raven included, confused about how he had managed to evade her. She turned around in time to see Naruto standing behind her, making a cross sign with his fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu! He yelled. All at once plumes of smoke appeared around the edges of the arena as perfect copies of Naruto appeared, surrounding her completely. The audience was stunned, with a few crying out that he was cheating, but Raven paid little mind to their protests. She readied herself as the clones all lunged for her, attempting to overwhelm her with numbers. They were sorely mistaken. In a circular swipe, Raven slashed through a majority of the clones, filling the air with white smoke as they disappeared. Only one remained, the original by all appearances. Before he could retaliate, Raven lunged at him, stabbing her sword through his chest before he could counter. She heard a satisfied thunk as her sword impaled him, something which should have brought a smile to her face but didn't. She'd killed before, and human bodies didn't make that sort of sound when impaled. Sure enough, her suspicions were confirmed when the stew disappeared, leaving in its place a large piece of wood with her sword firmly stuck in it. She didn't have much of a chance to yank it out when she took notice of several strange tags attached to it, all of them burning for some reason. She soon learned why when they all exploded at once, sending shards of wood sailing out in all directions. Bandits ducked and dove out of the way as shards of wood sailed through tents and impacted crates, barrels, and even the barricade. Only when the danger had passed did they venture to look up. Unsurprisingly, Raven had survived the surprise attack. A little singed around the edges but alive and pissed. Her eyes were locked onto a pair of Narutos across the arena, one holding his hand out while the other made what appeared to be exaggerated hand movements over the space around it. It was only when a small blue orb of energy began to appear that people took notice, taking a few cautionary steps away with some ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Raven herself held her ground, unsure of what might happen should she attack. She would soon realize this didn't matter as the second Naruto disappeared, leaving the first with the orb swirling dangerously in his palm. Not wasting a moment, he charged forward, forcing the orb forward as he cried out his attack. Rasengan! The orb flew through the air and straight at Raven, who took the attack with the flat of her blade. Rather than dissipating like she had assumed it would, it instead pushed into her, pressing her back as she struggled to maintain her guard. It was a battle of wills as Raven was pushed against the ground towards the edge of the arena, leaving a trail in her wake. After a while she decided she'd had enough and forced the attack aside at the last moment. Bandits once more dove out of the way, having learned from the last volley, and watched as the blue orb sailed through the air, taking out tents, crates, and even smashing through the barricade before dissipating in the nearby forest, but not before uprooting a few of the trees. Raven starred after it, watching its trail of destruction and finding a single bead of sweat trailing down her face. It was obvious she needed to bring this fight to an end now. Without a moment's hesitation she lunged forward, sending the pommel of her katana into his stomach, winding him, before giving him a swift roundhouse kick that sent him flying out and over the arena wall and into the dirt. Naruto landed with a groan, struggling to pull himself to his feet as bandits crowded around him. Gazing up at them, it was obvious he hadn't made any friends. On the contrary, it appeared the camp's overall opinion of him had suffered immensely, no thanks to his use of Rasengan during their fight. He was fully prepared for a fight, or rather to flee while looking like he was fighting, when Raven stepped from the arena herself, an amused smirk on her face. That was certainly an interesting fight. I haven't had a battle that close in quite some time, she said proudly. Raven, we should kick him out. Some of his attacks nearly injured us, and his last one tore a hole in our defenses. He's too dangerous to keep around, Vernal argued with several other bandits voicing their support. It's true he's dangerous and quite powerful, which is why he's staying, she said to the sound of grumbling and arguments. She continued, unless you want me to kick him out, thereby ensuring the possibility he'll be picked up by a rival tribe or haven and turned against us. This was met with silence, as no one wanted to consider that possibility. It was difficult enough for their tribe to survive with the threat of the Grim, as well as efforts made by local huntsmen to hunt them down and bring them to justice. Despite this, Naruto's little display had not endeared him to anyone. It would take a great deal of time and effort for him to earn their trust, and even then he was still an outsider. Regardless, Raven's word was law, and to go against Raven was to invite disaster, as the means of walking away from such a disrespectful act was to either publicly apologize to her or attempt to defeat her in combat. Obviously, most people chose the former option or simply avoided crossing her. Good, now that we've settled that, I want the barricade repaired before the end of the day. We don't want any Grim wandering inside while we're sleeping. The rest of you return to your duties. The bandits did as they were told, though not without a few grumblings here and there. Raven herself turned to regard Naruto, motioning for him to follow her. He followed her obediently, eager to distance himself from everyone else given his little mishap. She led him to the far side of the camp, well away from the others but still relatively close to her own overbearing abode. There he found a small one-person tent set aside for himself, or so he assumed. Inside he could see a cot and a small chest to stow his belongings in. "This is where you'll sleep from now on," she stated. "If you want something bigger you'll need to work for it. Nothing comes free in this world, though I'd venture the same could be said of your world as well. Anything you acquire during our raids is yours to keep. If something goes missing and you think someone stole it or you have a dispute with someone in the tribe, you'll work it out through combat. The winner, obviously, wins the dispute and that's that. Any questions?" "Just one. When do I start working?" he asked, less eager to become a bandit and more so to start learning about the world outside the camp. "I'll have you go on one of our raiding parties tomorrow. You'll be learning from them, so be expected to do as you're told. Remember, the strong survive, and the weak die." "I know," Naruto finished. "Good," she said with a smirk before turning to leave. Naruto laid in his cot, listening to the sounds of the bandits outside. He could hear faint laughter and some small talk going as well as a group play cards. Every now and then shadows would pass by his tent flap, but never for very long. He doubted he would have any visitors that night, and he was grateful for that fact. He had a lot on his mind and not very many sources he could turn to for answers. There was Raven, of course, who was no doubt knowledgeable about this world. She was certainly skilled, that much was for certain, and by the looks of the bandits she was the strongest amongst them by a fair margin. The only caveat was the fact that he suspected she would want something in return, and he wasn't too eager to know what her payment would be. He turned in his cot, his gaze falling upon his mysterious katana, which had somehow been formed from an ancient power buried deep within his family line. Even now it puzzled him. The QB didn't know much about it and didn't really care to investigate it any further. The fact that it had enabled them both to survive was enough for him. Raven was a no-go as well. It was obvious from their first encounter that the sword was a mystery to her as well, and if there was any possibility of finding information on it outside the camp, it would require a large favor on his part. Still, he was curious, not only with where it had come from but what that strange voice he kept hearing emanating from it was. Finally giving in to his curiosity for the strange weapon, he rose from his cot to sit down on the ground and pulled the sword forward. Releasing it from its sheath, he examined the blade, looking for any slight detail as to its origins or construction. He was disappointed to find a blunt and somewhat rusted blade. It obviously hadn't seen a whetstone in quite some time and looked more like an antique that someone would have on display in their home rather than strapped to their waist. Still, despite his initial opinion, he could feel a faint energy emanating from it. It somehow felt alive, which should have been impossible. Of course, given Naruto's life, the world he'd come from, and the journey he'd taken to get to this one, calling something impossible was rather careless. It was then, almost by instinct, that he felt the urge to meditate with the blade cradled in his hands. Following his instincts, and feeling a little silly while doing it, he sat as still as possible with the blade laying in his hands. Slowly, he closed his eyes and sensed the energy flowing from the blade. Manipulating his chakra, he tried to reach out to it, looking for a means to interact with it. It didn't take long for it to react, and not in the manner he had expected. The energy latched onto his own, overwhelming him, instantly sucking him into the blade. His vision went black as all sight and sound disappeared completely. He awoke to an icy world covered in snow as far as the eye could see. Despite the low temperatures, Naruto didn't feel cold in the slightest. The snow beneath his feet was soft and powdery, not at all what he would have expected. This, of course, didn't steal his attention for long, as he felt a presence there in the world with him. Slowly turning around, Naruto gazed up into the face of an immense dragon. It was unlike anything he'd seen. It was massive, a creature that appeared to have been carved entirely from ice. The details were quite intricate, down to the eyes that seemed to be glowing and the breath that came out in small clouds from its nostrils. It was also floating in the air, a detail that had taken him by surprise, as it stared intently down at him. Hello? He said. "So, you're the latest Shinigami, hm?" "Well, you're not very impressive, but I suppose you'll do," the creature said. Thanks, I think. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I am Hyarinmaru, the Frost Dragon. I am the Shurkai of the sword you now wield, Uzumaki Naruto. Alright, question. What's a Shurkai? A Shurkai is a powerful spirit which takes the form of a katana that all Shinigami wield. We vary in power and abilities, of which I am the most powerful ice spirit. Although, you should already know all of this, young Shinigami. It is basic knowledge that should have been taught to you while at the Soul Society. The Soul Society? This place is the Soul Society? Of course not. You're in a bandit camp, even I can see that, the dragon said loudly, obviously irritated for some unknown reason. After a moment's pause it leaned down, looking Naruto square in the eye before it asked, "You are not a Shinigami, are you?" "Well, I've no idea what that is, but I am a shinobi." "What? A shinobi?" The dragon bellowed in an outrage. "How can this be? What a disgrace, to have been stolen from my Shinigami by a mere shinobi. Such a thing is unthinkable." "Hey, I'm not that bad. Sure, I was last in my class, but I did manage to graduate. Plus, I came up my own jutsu. I call it the sexy no. I don't care about such drivel. The dragon roared, turning on Naruto. I demand to know how such a disgrace could have happened. Tell me, what have you done with my Shinigami? I keep trying to tell you. I have no clue what you're talking about. Listen, let me explain how I got here and maybe we can figure out what happened. Naruto then began to recount the long and tedious story of the events that had led up to him being transported to this world with Hyarinmaru along for the ride. Despite his initial outburst, the dragon listened intently, never making a sound. Naruto was grateful for that at least. It was difficult enough to have the spirit of a demon fox living inside of him, and now to have a giant frost dragon living inside a sword was starting to give him a headache. Once he was finished, he waited for his new companion to speak. He was silent for a while before he finally answered. So, it appears you have Shinigami blood running through your veins. How interesting. That would explain how you were able to summon me and even now communicate with me, I guess. This is all kind of new to me, so I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around it. No doubt you are. You mentioned you share your body with a QB, correct? Yes, but he's not much for conversation. Honestly, I can't stand the guy myself. Well then, let's see if we can't rectify the situation. Puzzled, Naruto stared up at the dragon, wondering what he meant. A few moments later, a strong wind began spiraling into a whirlwind right behind him. The wind grew more fierce, and while it wasn't cold, Naruto still had to cover his eyes just to be able to see what was happening. All at once the image of the nine-tailed fox came into view, standing on all fours and looking pissed beyond belief. Naruto yelped in surprise but soon found he had no reason to, as several long chains made from ice coiled themselves around the QB's legs, body, and neck, pinning it in place. QB, welcome, my name is Hyarinmaru and this is my realm. Like I give a damn. Why did you summon me here? The fox roared as it struggled against its restraints. Uzumaki, Naruto informed me that is by your power I was summoned in order to help you to escape the realm of beginnings and endings. The QB snarled and glared down at Naruto. While the restraints that held him looked strong, Naruto couldn't help the cold shiver that ran down his back. If looks could kill, then the QBs would have torn him to shreds. I did. We were in a desperate situation and I had to do something to help us survive. If you're mad, then take it out on the kid. He's the one I had to summon you from. On the contrary, I summoned you here to offer you my thanks. Huh? What? Naruto and the fox exchanged looks before looking back at Hyarinmaru. You're welcome? The QB answered, uncertain, no longer struggling against the chains that bound him. Indeed. Thanks to your intervention I was awoken from my long slumber. It seems much has changed since I was last awake. Regardless, despite the change in scenery, it is nice to be of use again, even if it means working alongside a most unimpressive child, he said, gazing down at Naruto. Hey, Naruto said in an indignant tone. The feeling's mutual, the QB replied. Hey, QB, might I ask you your name? My master, the one who created me, gave me the name of Kurama. I see. Then brother Kurama, it seems we have a long road ahead of us. I've no doubt you desire to return to your world, as does the boy. I honestly couldn't care. I'm stuck with the brat for now, so wherever he goes, I go. Indeed. Given our current situation, we can't stay here forever. This world is strange to me just as much as it is to you. I would therefore like to offer a suggestion. I'm listening. We work together to teach this boy what knowledge we possess. I'll help him to unlock his latent Shinigami powers and you assist him in becoming a more competent shinobi. In time, once he's gained a great deal more power within himself, we may be able to combine our abilities and return ourselves to our homes. Sounds good to me, Kurama said. Don't I get a say in this? Naruto asked. Do you have any objections? Hyarinmaru asked. Well, no, not really. I just don't like being left out of the conversation. I see. Well then, Uzumaki Naruto, it seems fate has brought us together. From this day onward you and I shall be partners. I will teach everything you will need to know to become a competent Shinigami. Once we have finished here, simply hold my blade and say rise above the frosted heavens, Hyarinmaru, and my full power shall be unlocked. It will enable me to instruct you without the need of this realm. Alright, no sweat. Very well, I look forward to training you, Uzumaki Naruto. Almost immediately Naruto found himself back in his tent, clutching the blunted katana in his hands. While he'd spent a good amount of time speaking with Hyarinmaru, it seemed as if very little time had passed in this world. For a moment he wondered if he had simply dreamed it all, but the faint pulse of energy coming from the blade made him think otherwise. Slowly, rising to his feet, Naruto gripped the sword by the hilt as he held it out in front of him. Rise above the frosted heavens, Hyarinmaru. All at once a cold rush of air erupted out of the tent and into the night. The katana changed immediately, shifting its appearance to nearly the opposite of what it had been before. The blade was now razor-sharp and shone brilliantly despite the low light seeping into his tent. The 4-star crossguard now had an overlapping crossguard, giving it 8 points in total, and a long thin chain ran from the sword's hilt down to a small crescent moon-shaped blade that hung at the end. The sword now pulsed with energy, filling Naruto with a sensation he'd never experienced before. For a moment he stared at the blade, stunned, before a smile grew across his face. Things were about to get very interesting. Chapter 2, Journey and Conflict. 3 years later, Mistral, outside the bandit camp. Now concentrate. Focus the energy at the soles of your feet. This will enable you to walk on air as if it were solid ground. Hyarinmaru, the frost dragon which inhabited the katana Naruto had somehow acquired 3 years ago, instructed. 3 years ago, Naruto clashed with his best friend and rival Uchiha Sasuke in an attempt to bring him back to their village and keep a promise he'd made to his long-time crush Sakura. Unfortunately, he'd failed, but in a manner that had come with some unexpected consequences. Thrown from his world due to the energy blast from his Rasengan and Sasuke's Chidori colliding, the 9-tailed demon fox which inhabited his body had done everything in its power to save them from being torn from existence, more so to save itself than Naruto. He'd succeeded, sending them to the world of Remnant and unlocking an ancient power buried deep within Naruto, one which his ancestors had wielded long ago. While Kurama's, which Naruto later learned was the Kyuubi's name, actions had saved them, it had brought along with it a whole plethora of other headaches as well, the most pressing of which was the fact that he was now stuck in a foreign world, one which he knew nothing about, and had no apparent way of returning home to fulfill his promise. The other was the discovery that the katana he'd somehow been found holding contained the spirit of a frost dragon named Hyarinmaru, who was just as, if not more so, annoying as Kurama. While he'd found it disturbing enough to have one alien voice in his head, having another was just ludicrous. It also never helped when the two agreed with one another, oftentimes tag-teaming on Naruto to berate him when he failed during his training. Needless to say, it had been a long 3 years. On top of all this was the fact that Naruto had been discovered by a tribe of bandits who had made their home deep within the forests of a country called Mistral. Their leader, a woman by the name of Raven Branwen, was a complete mystery to him. While she appeared confident and straightforward, in other ways she was mysterious, standoffish, and a complete unknown to him. Both Kurama and Hyarinmaru had warned him about her, telling him that they sensed a great power dwelling within her but were unable to elaborate on it further without seeing it for themselves. Considering just how powerful both entities that lived within him were, he wasn't in any rush to push Raven to the point of showcasing for him the power that dwelled just beneath the surface of her cocky grin. The bandits, as Naruto would come to find, had a simple life and lived by a simple code. The weak die, the strong survive. By their interpretation, that meant anyone they could steal from, overpower, or extort was considered weak and they themselves strong as a result. Naruto obviously scoffed at this, having a far different interpretation of the saying altogether, but, considering they had saved his life and that he would be living with them until he had a good gauge on his powers and the world as a whole, he went along with their philosophy, participating in raids and even traveling with them to nearby villages to extort money and supplies from the locals. While he did participate, he never caused any physical harm to their victims, and always endeavored to ensure they walked away without having to draw any blood. The toned-down violence seemed to irritate the other bandits, but, because Raven didn't have a problem with it, none of them did anything else to alleviate their frustrations yet. Now, 3 years later, Naruto was doing his best to learn everything he needed in order to master his new Soul Reaper powers. At least, that was what Hyarinmaru had called them. In truth, he had a very limited access to his powers. Apart from being able to call upon Hyarinmaru and use his powers associated with his sword, much of the abilities that a Soul Reaper would have had access to were beyond his abilities simply due to the fact that he was still living and now, well, dead. Still, he had managed to learn Zanjutsu, Hoho, and Hakuda, mastering all of them due to the fact that he had been raised in a shinobi village and taught taijutsu as part of his curriculum. His Shunpa needed work, but, considering he was able to travel through the trees with relative ease, it didn't really necessitate he master it any time soon. Of course, now he was attempting to master one of the more fundamental techniques most Soul Reapers knew, and his attempts were, well, unsatisfactory to say the least. Naruto grunted loudly as he once again kissed the ground. Concentrate, Hyarinmaru said in a disappointed tone. I am, you overgrown snow lizard. But it's more difficult than you make it out to be, Naruto argued. It shouldn't be. Every Soul Reaper is capable of performing this technique to the point that they are capable of doing it without thinking. This is imperative during battle when most of their attention is focused on the enemy, and they must maintain their footing throughout. I know that, but unless you've forgotten recently, I'm not a Soul Reaper. I'm a shinobi and I don't exactly see myself fighting Hallows anytime soon, he shot back. No, but your new life here has brought with it new enemies in the form of the Grim, many of which are capable of flight. Mastering this technique will go a long way to helping you combat them even while they are airborne. Maybe, but I can just use your ice attacks to freeze their wings and ground them. Why fight them on their own turf when I can bring them down to my level, he pointed out. Understand, Naruto, my powers are not meant for you to rely on. They are meant to help facilitate your own abilities, adding to what is already there, and increasing your power. To rely on me would put you at a great disadvantage, especially should you meet an enemy who is either immune to my abilities or can overcome them with ease. My powers are not a crutch for you to lean on. I understand that, Hyarinmaru, but you need to understand that I can't do everything you require of me. You keep referencing Soul Reapers like I'm one of them, but I'm not. I'm still very much alive and I expect to remain so for quite some time. Knowing that, there are going to be some setbacks to my abilities, regardless of whether you think I should be able to perform them or not. So you say, but, living or not, you should be capable of mastering this technique without much setback. Your continued failures is becoming increasingly worrisome. Yeah, about that, I think I know why it's happening. Just focus on me while I try it again, and see if you can sense what I'm sensing. Very well. Centering himself, Naruto once more began focusing the energy beneath his feet, preparing himself for another attempt. When he had started out, he had envisioned it in much the same way he performed his training with Kakashi-sensei while learning to climb trees. Back then Sakura had mastered it with ease, instructing him to focus the chakra at the soles of his feet to help him gain a better grip on the tree's trunk. He learned to do the same thing a year later but with walking on water, using his chakra to instead repel him, essentially pushing on the water as he walked across the surface. The same thing seemed to apply here, but Naruto soon found himself losing concentration or feeling the energy dissipate outright despite his efforts. True to his word, Hyarinmaru watched as the boy began to focus, the energy beginning to surround the soles of his feet as he prepared to walk on air. He managed to get a few feet in the air before the erasure completely dissipated through no effort of the boy's and sent him tumbling back to the ground. Luckily, Naruto was ready and caught himself before he face planted on the ground once more. I see now. Very interesting, Hyarinmaru murmured. What is it? Naruto asked, both curious and eager to find out what was preventing him from mastering the technique. Naruto, you are correct in stating that it's through no fault of your own that the technique is failing. In truth, it's due to certain energies within you that are not melding well with one another that is causing the problem. I'm not sure I understand, Naruto admitted. Allow me to explain. In your world, the people there are able to perform certain techniques called ninjutsu and genjutsu through an inherent power you all have called chakra. Yeah, that's a given. Usually, your people are born with chakra that is unique to you, ensuring you are able to perform these techniques through training and time. You, on the other hand, were born with your own chakra as well as the cubies. Yeah, made for a rough going my first few years. Our chakra had a way of clashing with one another. Indeed. As opposing forces they nullified one another, often causing problems, though in some cases the cubies chakra would envelope you completely, giving you immense power but at the cost of your sanity, and, in some cases, life force. However, once you learn to harmonize your chakra you will undoubtedly be able to increase the power of your abilities tenfold, making you a force to be reckoned with. I never thought of that. But what does that have to do with why I'm completely failing at walking on air? I was about to explain that now. Hush, Hyarinmaru chided him. The energy I use called erasure is fundamentally different from chakra. While it is something that is naturally occurring, it is an energy that is exclusively used by the dead, by soul reapers, and thus not typically utilized by the living. Were you to die and become a soul reaper you would no doubt be able to master our various techniques, but it would come at a cost. You would no longer be able to perform jutsu of any kind. Chakra is, as far as I can tell, an energy exclusively used by a living vessel. It's not something that naturally occurs in the soul society. It's because of its natural occurrence that your techniques are being hindered and, in some cases, outright fail. Your chakra is clashing with erasure, much in the way that fire and water would clash and cancel each other out. Every time you attempt this technique the erasure you produce melds with your chakra, vying for control, until they ultimately cancel one another out and the technique fails. Oh, I see, Naruto said, understanding somewhat what Hyarinmaru was explaining to him. So is this simply a problem that I'm going to have to live with? Perhaps, though, once you unlock your Bankai the problem may disappear completely, Hyarinmaru suggested. Oh? What's a Bankai? A Bankai is the second form, one which unlocks incredible power within the user. It essentially takes on the form of one's soul, giving you access to limitless amounts of erasure and enabling you to access powerful techniques that were otherwise locked to your before. Think of it in the same way you might become more powerful should you and Kurama finally manage to stop squabbling and work together, merging your chakra as one. That sounds awesome. When do I unlock my Bankai? Well, most soul reapers unlock their Bankai after a century of dedicated training. What? A century? I don't have that kind of time. Relax, Naruto, I have faith in you. You've taken to this training better than most, and considering just how deeply connected you and I are to one another, you may be closer to unlocking your Bankai than we realize. Oh, well, that's good to hear, Naruto said, calming down a bit. That said, it will take no less commitment to your training in order to unlock, and there may even be some complications upon gaining access to it. Complications? Like what? Recall how I said your chakra and the erasure were opposing forces? Yeah, Naruto replied. Just as the Bankai unlocks a vast amount of erasure, your chakra or that of the cubies may rush in to oppose it as a result. In other words, while you may be able to unlock this power and perform all of the techniques of a soul reaper without fail, it may also lead to the two energy forces opposing one another in a most violent fashion. What do you by that? Naruto asked nervously. The opposing forces could cause a massive explosion the likes of which would no doubt kill you, including your soul. What? Naruto yelped, imagining himself blowing up like a balloon before exploding violently. That is only a theory, Naruto. We won't know for sure until you unlock your Bankai, Hyarinmaru replied. Yeah, great, Naruto said, not at all reassured by that information. Naruto, stop talking to yourself for a moment. I have a mission for you, Raven said, stepping out from the tree line. I wasn't talking to myself, I was speaking with Hyarinmaru, Naruto explained. Right, that's the name you gave your katana, she said, glancing down the sword he held in his hand. I named mine too. It's called Slashy McStabber, though I don't often talk to it out in the open like some of us, she said with a cheeky grin. I wasn't, huh? What do you want? He asked, realizing there was no use in trying to convince her otherwise. I'm sending some of the boys into the nearby village to raid supplies. I want you to go along with them, to make sure they don't do anything stupid, Naruto finished for her. Pretty much. They're leaving soon, so you better get a move on. Right, he said, stowing his katana back in its sheath. Raven, when I get back, there's something we need to discuss. Sure, I'll make some room in my schedule, she said sarcastically. Naruto rolled his eyes, ignoring her chuckling as he made his way back to the camp. Come on, old man, I know you're holding out on us, the bandit said, the edge of his blade tickling the bartender and proprietor of the inn. Please, that's all I can spare. Anything more and we'll having nothing to help us get through the next month, let alone the year, the man said, trembling as his eyes flickered between the blade and its owner. That's a real shame. Not that I care. But if you can't part with your merchandise, he said, his eyes roving over the young woman standing next to him, a girl barely 18 with short brown hair and blue eyes, perhaps we can come to another arrangement. The bandit said with a cruel smile. No, please, not my daughter. I'll give you whatever you want, just don't harm her, the man pleaded. Who said anything about harming her? I was thinking of showing her a good time, he said, the girl flinching away as he moved to touch her hair. That's enough, Naruto said, grabbing the bandit's wrist as he bore holes into the side of his skull. We have more than enough supplies, we don't need the rest. Hey, I'm in charge of this raid, I'll decide if we have enough, the bandit argued, his eyes turning to thin slits as he gazed at Naruto. And I was sent to make sure you don't do anything stupid. Again, Naruto hissed. You know, ever since you were brought to the tribe you've had a nasty habit of acting out. I've seen the way you look at us, you think you're better than the rest of the members of our tribe. Even the casual way you talk to Raven. It makes me want to puke, the man spat, turning his blade on him. You don't want to do this, Naruto warned him. Ha, what are you doing to do? You going to whip out that katana of yours, pretty boy? He mocked. I won't need it to handle you, Naruto replied. The bandit sneered, glaring at Naruto for a moment, before he roared and raised the blade over his head. He swung wildly at him, his fellow bandits moving out of the way to avoid being hit, while the bartender moved to shield his daughter from any attacks that came their way. Naruto swam around the attacks with ease, his moves being telegraphed before he struck. At a certain point when the blade came down, Naruto took hold of his hand, twisting his wrist and forcing him to drop his blade before elbowing him in the face. He heard a satisfying crunch as he broke his nose, causing the man to stumble backwards in surprise. While he was stunned, Naruto punched him in the gut, causing him to double over before slamming a fist into the back of his head. Being one of the few bandits with his aura unlocked, he was spared lethal damage, but was nonetheless knocked unconscious. Pick him up and take him back to camp, he instructed to the other bandits. They glared balefully at him but otherwise did as they were told, picking up their friend before hauling him out of the inn. Naruto took his bag, sifting through the contents before throwing it at the innkeeper's feet. The man was startled, glancing between the bag and Naruto with a look of confusion. That's yours, I believe. We have what we need. I won't be taking anything else, he said. The man simply nodded, grateful but unable to say anything. Naruto returned his nod before exiting the building and following after the others. No doubt they'd be spinning a tale to Raven about what he'd done. It was just as well. They needed to speak anyways. So, let me get this straight, you attacked one of my lieutenants, breaking his nose and knocking him out before departing the settlement with our supplies, Raven recounted. I was defending myself. He attacked me first, Naruto corrected. What does it matter? He made us look weak in front of the locals, the bandit argued, his nose bandaged and making his voice sound nasally as a result. That is true. Your actions could send a bad message to the villagers. This infighting may encourage them to start rebelling against us or even seek to hire a huntsman. His actions would have caused that regardless. We had everything we needed. He got greedy and when the man argued with him, saying they wouldn't have enough to survive, he went after his daughter instead, Naruto pointed out. It was simply an incentive, a lesson to teach them not to question us, the bandit stated. I've heard enough, Raven said, raising her arm for silence. I know what we need to do, she said as she approached Naruto. The bandit with the broken nose watched eagerly, a greasy smirk spreading across his face as he watched with anticipation for Naruto to get his just rewards. He was unprepared for the backhanded slap that Raven gave him, sending him toppling across the ground. Off to the side Verna watched, and chuckled softly to herself, feeling some sort of sick amusement at the man's plight. You idiot. This is exactly why I sent Naruto along with you, she said, towering over the man as her cowered on the ground, clutching his bruised cheek. When I send you on supply runs it's to get supplies that we need or are running low on, not to indulge your personal greed or lusts. You know what would have happened had we taken everything from that village? They would have either moved on or been overtaken by the Grim. That leaves us with one less village to get our supplies from, which puts more pressure on us as a result. If we did that to every village we came across we'd have to pack up and leave, either because there was nothing left for us to take, or because our actions were beginning to attract the attention of the Huntsman Academies. This was your last chance to show me you could be trusted, but it's obvious you can't. Get out of my tent. I'll come up with a suitable punishment for you later, Raven snarled. Still shaken, the bandit slunk from the tent, shooting a glare in Naruto's direction as he departed. Raven spat on the ground, obviously upset with the man, but otherwise done with him for now. You did well, Naruto. I was right to send you with him, she mused. Raven, we need to talk, Naruto said, getting straight to the point. Of course. Vernal, prepare some tea for us, she instructed. Vernal did as she was instructed, Raven and Naruto taking seats at her small table while they waited. Raven's face maintained a pleased smirk on it while Naruto's was more serious as he contemplated what he would need to speak with her about. As soon as Vernal had poured them both a cup from part of the supplies they'd stolen no less, she quickly exited the tent, attending to some of her other duties. So, she began, taking a sip of her tea, what did you want to talk to me about? I'm leaving, he said flatly. Raven stopped, her cup inches from her lips. Slowly she lowered it back down to the table, her amused expression from earlier having completely disappeared. You're leaving, she repeated, her expression neutral as she looked at him. Yes, I've decided it's time I start traveling remnant. I have a promise to keep, after all, and I can't do that sitting around here. I see, she said, taking a moment to consider her next words. You don't have to leave, you know. You're strong, if not a little strange. You could do well with us, make us stronger. I've never been welcomed here, Raven. Aside from you, the rest of the tribe simply tolerates my presence. They don't accept me as one of their own. I could change that, she said. I don't want you to, he replied. I'm leaving and there's nothing you can say to keep me here. I see, she said again. When can I expect your departure? Tomorrow morning. I've already gathered the necessary supplies. Where will you going then? Mistral first. I'll figure out my next destination from there. Very well then. I'd wish you the best, but that's never been my style. If you ever decide to come back though, I wouldn't say no to having you with us again, she said with a smirk. We both know that won't happen, Naruto said, standing up to leave. We'll see, Raven said, watching him depart her tent. You sure about this, kid? There's no turning back from here, Kurama, the nine-tailed fox demon asked him. It's either stay here for the rest of my life or start walking and searching for a way back home. Which would you choose? Fair enough, though I hope you realize this journey of yours will not be easy. Regardless of the amount of literature Raven gave you access to, there's a great difference between reading about a world and experiencing it. I know, and that's why I can't wait to get out there. Several weeks passed for Naruto as he traveled through Mistral. From where the Branwen tribe had been situated, it took him nearly a week to make his way to the capital city of Mistral where the Huntsman Academy of Haven was situated. Naruto had heard a great deal about the academies, mostly in words filled with disdain from either Raven or the bandits. Raven rarely ever spoke about her time spent at the one called Beacon. He wondered what had occurred in her history to cause such disdain for that in her view, but he never ventured to ask, mostly because he knew it would come at her sword pressed to his throat as a warning. He managed to make some lean along the way, helping to eradicate grim villages were being attacked by and the like. His skills with Hyrinro had improved to such a degree that he was able to use his abilities without much effort, though his attempts to walk on air still ended with him kissing the ground after only a few seconds. Still, it was better than nothing, and before long Naruto found himself on a train bound for Argus, a city off the Mistral northern coastline where he would have the chance to travel by airship to the continent of Mantle, where the floating city of Atlas and its Huntsman Academy were housed. Naruto had read a little about Atlas, mainly about its harsh climate, and its hand in aiding Mistral during the Great War nearly 80-odd years ago. Since then, after the discovery of several dust mines, it had risen to become one of the foremost producers of dust-powered machines and boasting the largest army on Remnant, one which was comprised mostly of synthetic automatons. Currently he dressed in some warmer clothing with closed-toed shoes as well to keep his toes from freezing off. He'd been alone for most of the journey, occasionally making acquaintances along the way, but otherwise not fostering any long-lasting relationships. He didn't know how long or how far his journey would take him, and as such he was unsure of if or when he'd have a chance to set down roots. All he knew was that his journey had him going to Argus, to Mantle, simply because his instincts told him to head there. Is this seat taken? Naruto tore his eyes from his window view to see who had spoken to him. At first he thought he was just hearing things until the woman cleared her throat, drawing his attention closer to the floor. He was surprised to see a woman, short enough to reach barely to his waist, with tan skin, long braided white hair and a ponytail, and strangely oversized goggles set over her eyes. The goggles seemed to work in the same way as glasses as he watched metal shutters open and close, as if her eyes were adjusting to the light or himself. Her clothes were quite interesting, certainly different from anything he'd seen while in Mistral. The one thing that stuck out to him the most was her walking stick, which sported a large skull on top, intricately colored in an elaborate pattern. Not at all. Go ahead, he replied, motioning to the seat opposite him. Thank you, young man, she said, hobbling into the car before pulling herself up onto the seat. Naruto returned to gazing out the window, all the while feeling like the woman's eyes were set on him. A quick glance over showed that they were indeed, though whether her eyes were truly on him or simply her odd-looking goggles, he couldn't say. Still, having them on him was a bit unsettling and was making him feel increasingly uncomfortable. I'm Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, he introduced himself, attempting to dispel the awkward atmosphere. Maria Calavera, wonderful to meet you, young man, she replied. Where are you headed, if you don't mind me asking? Not at all. I'm on my way to Atlas. I have to make an annual trip every year to have my eyes adjusted, she said, tapping her goggles. Your eyes? I'm sorry, I hadn't realized, he said, a little embarrassed. Don't be. Part of the hazards of spending most of my life as a huntress. Unfortunately, one bad mission cost me my eyes and I've been wearing these ever since. That is unfortunate. Still, it could be worse, he said, attempting to lighten the mood. Yes, assuming Cordovan isn't there. Cordovan? He asked. Yes, she's the commander of the Atlas base at Argus as well as my personal enemy. I bring one bag of cashews onto a flight, and suddenly she finds it necessary to place me on an extended screening list, she complained. Oh, that's unfortunate, Naruto said, attempting to sound sympathetic. The rest of the trip was mostly spent in silence with Naruto gazing out the window at the snow-laden landscape, while Maria seemed to have fallen asleep. Before long he arrived at his destination, a large modernized town set on the coast. Naruto gazed around at the architecture with wonder. While Naruto had spent some time in Mistral, Argus was a different beast altogether. The blend of Elysian and Mistralian architecture somehow managed to mesh, as well as clash in ways that made sense to the city itself. It didn't take him much time to find his way down the Atlas base. The damn thing stood out like a sore thumb, looking like a giant boot sitting in the middle of the bay. Large gates prevented anyone from venturing onto the base without permission, authorization, or a specific reason for being there. Naruto, at the very least, had a good reason for coming. Slipping into the line meant for those taking an airship overseas. He waited until he was motioned to step forward and have his bags checked by the security personnel. Two large men, with their faces mostly obscured by their hats, stepped forwards to inspect his belongings. Naruto gazed up at them, wondering if they were there to impose some sort of intimidation over anyone who might think of causing trouble. All it did was cause Naruto to try and stifle the laugh he had at how comical the two of them looked and acted. Sir, you'll need to check that sword, one of them said, motioning to the katana strapped to Naruto's hip. Sorry, can't. It's a family heirloom. Wouldn't want it getting damaged during the flight, he lied. Unacceptable. Our commander has instructed that all weapons are to be checked on the airship. No acceptations, his twin chimed in. Naruto cringed, not quite sure how he was going to get out of this. He's learned from Hirimura that he was very particular about who handled him with his attack against the bandit who had tried to steal him being one such example. He could talk with him and try to get him to let the guards take him, at least for the flight. But he doubted the Frost Dragon would be very accommodating. Look guys, seriously, I have to have this on my person at all times, he said, placing a protective hand on the weapon. What's going on here? A shrill voice called out. At the sound of the voice the two guards stood erect, their hands coming up in a salute. Naruto looked at them curiously before looking towards the tiny woman who was making her way over to them. Naruto was having a bad case of déjà vu as he gazed down at her. She was a tiny woman, dressed in an Atlas military uniform with commander officer insignia pinned to her lapel. Her hair was gray and cut short, probably due to regulations, and her expression was neutral, bordering on bored. She approached them, the two men holding their salutes until she gave them a nod, allowing them to relax, which he assumed they did, though their stature didn't change. What's going on here? Why hasn't that man's weapon been checked? Commander Cordovan, he refuses to relinquish his weapon, one of the soldiers replied. I think this is all just a misunderstanding, he began but was interrupted by their commander. There is no misunderstanding. I ordered all weapons to be checked with no exceptions and you are disobeying that protocol. Either check your weapon or I will have you removed from the premises, she said sharply. Naruto's warm smile quickly died as he realized there was no negotiating with this woman. He took a moment to consider his options, wondering how he might explain his weapon attacking one of her men when they went to handle it, or if it would be better to leave and attempt to get to Atlas through some other means. It seemed he was taking too long as Cordovan looked to have made up her own mind, but he was quickly rescued by the most unlikely of allies. There you are. You should have told me you were checking early. Sorry to keep you waiting. Cordovan's extended screening policy is a nightmare to get through. Gods curse that bitch, Maria said, hobbling up to Naruto as he stared down at her with a confused expression. Maria seemed not to notice as she stared up at him with that warm, comforting smile all grandmothers seemed to have mastered before turning her gaze on a now scowling Cordovan. Oh, speak of the devil and she shall appear. I'm surprised I didn't smell any sulfur or brimstone that typically warns of your arrival, Cordovan, she said. Maria Calavera. I take it you know this miscreant? She asked, motioning to Naruto. Of course I do. He's my grandson, she replied matter-of-factly. Naruto's confused look deepened, wondering what the woman was getting at by stating something that was obviously a lie. Grandson? Cordovan said, looking between him and Maria in an attempt to pick out the resemblance. Or maybe the lie was just obvious to him. Yep, family lives out in Vacuo. Came out here to train in preparation for his initiation at Shade next year. I was helping him to hone his skills and he's offered to escort me to my appointment, she replied, tapping her goggles for emphasis. I see, she said, glancing up at Naruto with a renewed look of disdain. Regardless of his heritage, the boy still needs to check his weapon. No exceptions. Can't do that, Maria said. And why not? Cordovan countered. It's part of his training. The sword is a family heirloom, going all the way back to the days of the Great War. Lot of history in it. Wouldn't want one of your boys fumbling and chipping it now, would we? She asked. I can assure you my men are extremely competent, and will endeavor to ensure the weapon arrives at its destination unharmed. So you say, but I've heard reports of higher grim sightings all along our route, Maria said, raising her voice so that the other passengers could hear her. Would be a shame if we were attacked by some Nevermore or Lancers and the only huntsman-trained passenger was unable to help because Atlas policy required he check his weapon. Cordovan cringed as she heard the hushed and frantic whispers of the other passengers, their panic already spelling bad news for the flight. I can assure you all Atlas is more than equipped to handle any grim threat we might encounter along our route, Cordovan said, attempting to calm them down. Would you bet your life on it? Maria challenged, dividing the crowd and putting Cordovan in a bad spot. Let him through, she said, waving her hand. But ma'am, one of her men attempted to argue. Are you questioning my orders? She snapped. No, Commander, he said, snapping a salute before quickly closing up Naruto's luggage. You're clear to board, sir. Have a nice flight. Naruto nodded his affirmation before grabbing his luggage and making his way towards the airship, slowing his pace so Maria could keep up with him and maintain the guise of them being family. As soon as they had boarded, he stowed his luggage under his seat while keeping his hands on his katana. As soon as Maria had pulled herself up on her seat, he leaned over to whisper to her discreetly. Grandson, huh? Would you have preferred I designated you as my lover? She asked. Naruto shivered, hearing a chuckle from Maria in response. Cordovan has always had Atlas policy wedged up her butt. I knew she wasn't going to budge unless I intervened. You're welcome, by the way. Yes, thank you. I owe you one for that, he replied. Think nothing of it, she said, waving it off. That sword's important to you, isn't it? She asked. Yeah, you might say it has a mind of its own, he replied, glancing down at Hirameru. I know what you mean. I guess it's something unique to the huntsman culture, but once you've worked with a weapon for a time, you start to think of them less as a tool and more of a person, like they have a personality all their own to go along with their history. I know what you mean, Naruto agreed. I do have one question, though. Why help me? You had no reason to, so why step in? You mean aside from ruffle Cordovan's feathers a bit? She asked, with Naruto nodding back in affirmation. I like you, kid. It's part of the reason I choose to share a train car with you. I took one look at you and knew you were someone I'd take a shine to. Just from a look? He asked, not at all convinced. Of course. Why not? She said, giving him her signature grandmotherly smile. Mantle, Tundra Trading Port. It was several hours before the airship landed safely at their destination. Despite the tense atmosphere, courtesy of Maria, they didn't encounter any grim along the way. This would have been a blessing in Naruto's books were it not for the woman sitting next to him. All attempts he'd made to try and sleep were interrupted by her either telling him one of her many stories regarding her, and her ever-evolving conflict with Cordovan, or the simple fact that she had once again snuck a bag of cashews on board the airship. How she had managed that, he honestly didn't want to know, and being her grandson, was required to somehow get her out of the situation. Once they landed, however, Naruto offered her a quick goodbye before grabbing his luggage and making a beeline for his hotel. The sooner they parted ways the better. After a hot meal and a warm shower, he settled himself down to sleep. Being along the coast of Mantle, the sky had already turned dark, making it relatively easy to fall asleep. He must have dozed off at some point. Hirameru clutched to his chest, when a shrill blaring sound from outside roused him from his sleep. Naruto snorted, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he stumbled towards the frost-covered windows. Outside he could see people leaving the buildings, heading towards what looked to be a large bunker. Large floodlights along the wall light up the night, passing over the frozen open tundra in search of something. What the hell's going on? He grumbled. Naruto, you better get out there. I can sense something coming, he heard Kurama reply. What do you mean something? He asked, suddenly awake and alert. Grim, from what I can sense. A lot of them too. There's something else but I can't quite figure out what it is. He didn't need to be told twice, quickly slipping on his warmer clothing before racing outside. As people ran past him towards the bunker, Naruto moved in the opposite direction, climbing the wall so he had a better view of what was coming. It was difficult to tell at first, but slowly a black mass began making its way towards the village. Large cat-like Grim, with long bone teeth protruding down past their lower lips and an inch or two further, padded quickly across the frozen ground. Already, large automated guns atop the wall had sprung to life, their erratic movements causing the ice and snow that had collected on them and their dormancy cascading off them as they began firing at the approaching Grim force. The weapons were effective, mowing down countless Grim before they even made it halfway across the open ground, but there was a problem. The guns had a limited supply of ammo, and the Grim number didn't appear to be dropping anytime soon. Before long one would have to give out to the other, and Naruto had a feeling it wouldn't be the Grim. Hirameru, can I ask you something? I take it it's in regards to the creatures assaulting our position, the Frost Dragon replied. Yeah, would you be able to create a wall of ice as thick as this one, and just as long? I want to give everyone here the greatest advantage and hopefully ensure anyone on their way will have more time. Naruto, my abilities are the greatest of any ice entity. Even without water molecules present in the air, I am still capable of generating ice on a massive scale. Now, being surrounded by ice, my abilities will be without parallel. I can do what you ask and more should you require it. Alright then, let's do this, Naruto said, leaping down from the wall and racing towards the Grim. If anyone had yelled out to him, warning him off what he was doing. He didn't hear it. Between the roaring of the cannons and the cries of the Grimm, all other sound had been drowned out. Naruto's feet beat heavily against the frozen ground, the chilled night air ensuring the freshly fallen snow had frozen over, making it easier for the Grimm to traverse over it with their claws. Naruto was about to make it that much harder. Keeping a good distance away from the Grimm, he drew Hyarinmaru from its sheath before calling on him for aid. Rise over the frosted heavens, Hyarinmaru. At his words the sword visibly changed, Naruto's body being charged with immense energies shared between himself and the frost dragon. Feeling the surge, he quickly envisioned a wall of ice several feet high and just as thick before swinging the sword in a horizontal arc. To anyone watching, the effect from his sword would have been chalked up to an expert usage of ice dust. Light blue energy cascaded from the blade, causing a massive wall to appear before him. What few Grimm had made their way atop or past it were quickly torn to shreds by the gun turrets, but none more made any attempts to climb the structure or smash their way through, a detail Naruto found rather odd. Hyarinmaru, I'm guessing you did something more that I'm not aware of. Indeed. In addition to the wall, I lined the opposite side with icicles 3 to 4 feet thick going all the way up and running the entire length of it. They'll be hard-pressed to climb it, let alone attack. Any that do will simply be wasting their time. Naruto couldn't help but smirk at his explanation. It was more than what Naruto was hoping to achieve, which was a good thing. So long as the Grimm were safely held at bay until Atlas forces came to mop up the rest, it was good enough for him. At the same time the turrets had ceased firing, another blessing considering that their gunfire might just punch a few holes in his wall, making it easier for the Grimm to find a way through and redouble their efforts for the assault. Making his way back towards the wall, Naruto saw some figures standing there waiting for him. One looked to be an Atlas officer, possibly the one stationed here to watch over the town and make sure the turrets were kept in working condition. He was flanked by several white figures and as he drew closer he recognized them as Elysian Knights, the military's signature frontline tool. Being robots and thus not real people, they were a disposable asset that Atlas used in conjunction with their regular forces, sacrificing them to the Grimm while ensuring the real flesh and blood troops remained safe from any harm. As he approached, Naruto sheathed his sword. The hand the soldier had set protectively on his weapon was lowered and he nodded as he approached. Nice work out there. Very impressive stuff, he said, nodding his an indication to the wall of ice. Just figured I'd lend a hand, Naruto replied simply. I'd say you did more than that. The Grimm will be held off either until they circle around or break through. Currently, I haven't received any warning signals from the turrets further down the wall, so I don't think they've thought to loop around. Any reinforcements? He asked. Yes, all the way from Atlas 2. They're being led by a specialist. Makes sense considering this is a major shipping port for the SDC. The SDC? Yeah, the Schnee Dust Company. It doesn't surprise me they'd send one of their own to make sure one of their assets is handled properly. Naruto had to agree. It made sense that a large company such as theirs, which spanned the whole of Remnant, would want one of its major trading ports handled by someone who was familiar with their work. He could only wonder who they were sending and what they would have to say. Maybe he could learn something from them or hitch a ride to Atlas? His thoughts were quickly cut short by the sound of something bashing against the wall. Naruto looked back along with the officer, gazing at the wall of ice. The whole of it was shaking violently and bit by bit cracks could be seen grouped in one area, growing bigger and spreading out as the thumping continued. Kurama? He asked, sending his thoughts to the fox demon within himself. It's a Grimm, a big one. I sensed it earlier but it was too far away to make out among the others. Damn thing's going to break through the ice wall and this one if we don't intervene. What the hell's going on? The officer shouted. A Grimm. A big one, Naruto answered, echoing what he'd just been informed of. All the way out here? That's impossible. We don't get Grimm of that size all the way out here. Our turrets won't be enough to slow the damn thing down. They won't have to, Naruto replied, removing Hyarinmaru from his sheath once more. Can you program the turrets to target the small Grimm only? Well, yeah, just have to reset the targeting parameters. You're not thinking of taking that thing on your own, are you? You have any better ideas? Naruto asked, the officer falling silent under his gaze. I'm not stupid enough to think I can kill it on my own. Best I'm hoping for is that I can keep it busy until our reinforcements arrive. How long until they get here? About 4 to 5 minutes, but that's still a long time to handle one massive Grimm on your own. Just keep the little ones off my back and away from the main wall. I'll handle the rest, Naruto said, racing back towards the wall before the man could try to talk him out of it. Naruto quickly recited the chant once more, causing the sword to shift into its awakened form. The closer he moved to the wall, the more Naruto felt the shockwaves from the Grimm's battering, its attacks causing the very ground beneath his feet to quake. Holding Hyarinmaru firmly in his hands, he stared across the field at the hole that was about to burst forth, prepping himself for the ensuing battle to come. Hyarinmaru, I'm going to be relying on your power to get me through this fight, he said. That seems fairly obvious. I'll back you up as best I can. We should consider ourselves lucky that this climate works so well in conjunction with my powers. Yeah, couldn't have asked for better circumstances, Naruto replied. By the way, thanks for not chiding me or calling me foolish for going in alone. Most people would think what I'm doing to be very foolish. That's because it is, Hyarinmaru replied. However, your choice to stand and face your foe, despite how much weaker you may be compared to them, shows more courage than I've seen in others, living or dead. You have my respect for that, Naruto. Naruto couldn't help but feel a little bolstered by the dragon's words. In truth, he was scarred beyond belief. He had no idea what was breaking through on the other side, but it had to be massive and powerful, not to mention intelligent, to have survived out here for so long. Gazing at the wall, he could tell it was one last smack away from caving, and then he would have to face off against his new opponent. Sure enough, with one last colossal smack, the ice shattered, sending snow and shards of ice in all directions. Naruto used his free hand to shield himself from the ice, Kurama's chakra kicking in to quickly heal the small cuts he received from the glass-like shards. A behemoth of a Grimm stepped forward, towering over Naruto, and reaching nearly up to level with the top of his ice wall. Naruto recognized the beast instantly, having read about it from some of the books Raven had liberated for him during his time with her tribe. It was a Goliath, an elephant-like Grimm that seldom, if ever, strayed towards cities or settlements. They weren't often seen, with most hunters going their entire career without encountering one. It was usually those who liked to venture out into the wilds who came across these behemoths, with only the most skilled ever living to tell about them, let alone bring one down. He stared up at the massive mask of white bone, the red markings on it being the only indication he had of it having eyes. If it did, they were probably on the side of its head. The beast moved forward, shaking the ground with every step, before raising its trunk and bellowing out a long, loud trumpet. Naruto covered one of his ears with his free hand, his grip on Hyarinra tightening. Like a swarm of bugs billowing out from their uncovered nests, the other smaller Grimm began pouring from the wound the Goliath had made in his wall. Surprisingly, they ignored him completely, instead making their way towards the town wall. To his credit, while there was now a gaping hole in the wall of ice he'd made, it still made things difficult for the rest of the Grimm, ensuring only a certain amount of them could make it through at a time, and making them an easier target for the turrets to target and eliminate. Without waiting for an invitation, Naruto sprinted forward, aiming to duck under the Grimm's legs and out of its field of vision. Unfortunately, it noticed him immediately, swinging its trunk at the ground to try and impede him. Naruto managed to dodge out of the way, ignoring the snow and ice that pelted him from the creature's attack, before sliding down between its massive legs. With Hyarinra clutched in his hands, he swung at the backs of its legs in an attempt to sever its tendons. Black blood flowed from the wounds, but they seemed to have no effect on the creature aside from infuriating it further. It stomped at the ground, attempting to squash him like an annoying bug under its feet. Realizing that he may very well end up crushed underfoot, he quickly made his way out from under it, expecting to come out at its rear only to have the creature turn to focus him in its sights. Naruto, jump! He heard Hyarinra order. He didn't need to be told twice, focusing what ray sure he could muster under his feet, and using it to propel himself upwards. He dodged just as the Goliath's trunk slammed onto the ground he'd occupied, with Naruto breathing a sigh of relief at having evaded its attack. Seeing an opportunity, he aimed for its back, landing on top and out of range of the creature. I should be safe up here, he said, taking a moment to catch his breath. The moment didn't last long, however, as the Goliath immediately sensed his presence and began rampaging in an attempt to dislodge him. Naruto panicked, looking for anything that might help him stay on top, and finally thrust Hyarinra deep into its back in an effort to keep him stable. This only served to enrage the Grimm further, as it lurched back, attempting to buck him off. Despite its enormous size, its movements were still powerful enough to throw Naruto around. Bouncing around on the creature's back, he could only hold on to Hyarinra's hilt in desperation to remain on the beast. Unfortunately, Hyarinra soon dislodged from its place, and he along with Naruto were sent flying onto the hard-packed snow. Struggling to rise to his feet, the Goliath loomed over him, rearing back on its hind legs as it prepared to stomp him into paste. Naruto, attack now! Hyarinra shouted. Surging to his feet, Naruto did as he was instructed, planting the blade into the giant's exposed underbelly. He felt a surge of energy travel through the sword before the creature stopped mid-drop, shuddering in a manner that was quite strange. Naruto soon realized the reason why, as ice burst from the creature's back and torso, inked black as it mixed with its blood. Retracting Hyarinra, Naruto quickly put some distance between himself and the Grimm as its massive form fell forward, gravity having taken over, and it collapsed in a heap on the ground before it began to slowly dissolve into black flakes. Thanks for the assist, Naruto panted. Don't. I need you alive in order to operate in this world. It was simply a matter of circumstance. Whatever, Naruto grumbled, his words being drowned out by the sound of bullheads flying overhead. It seemed the promised reinforcements had arrived as they flew low, using their mounted guns to slice through the remaining Grimm like Swiss cheese. Those that remained were quickly moped up by the wall turrets, their corpses left to dissolve out on the open tundra. Taking one last flyby to ensure they'd eliminated all of the Grimm, the bullheads changed their course for the town, landing in the open fields just outside. Naruto began making his way back when the officer he'd met with earlier came running up to him, nearly out of breath when he finally reached him. That was incredible, the man said between pants. Thanks? Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head. Honestly, I only meant to slow it down. Didn't think I'd actually be able to kill the damn thing. Well, it was impressive enough. The specialist they sent along wishes to speak with you. Apparently your little show out there caught her attention. The specialist is a woman? Naruto asked, a bit surprised. Naruto followed the officer out to the Bullhead's landing zone. Already, several Atlas soldiers along with Elysian Knights had exited the aircraft, creating a perimeter as they took stock of the damage caused by the Grim. Among them the lone woman, who Naruto assumed was the specialist, stood out. She stood erect, barking out orders with a stern expression. Her weapon, a saber from what he could see, was strapped to her hip. What stuck out more, however, was her hair, which blended in almost perfectly with the surrounding ice and snow. Specialist Schnee, the officer said, giving her a sharp salute which the woman returned with a small nod. This is the young man who took down the Goliath. Uzumaki Naruto, he introduced himself, extending his hand in expectation of a handshake. The woman stared at it, cocking an eyebrow, and leaving Naruto to wonder if he'd done something wrong, but eventually took it, and gave it a firm shake before he could retract it. Specialist Winter Schnee. Impressive work out there. Where were you trained? She asked. Self-taught actually, he replied, causing the woman's eyebrow to rise higher, if it even could. Really? Not many huntsmen have the skill to take on a Goliath alone, let alone best one. I honestly didn't expect I'd be able to kill it. I was actually hoping to slow it down until you arrived to take care of it. A sound strategy. A bit reckless but noble nonetheless, she said, turning her gaze towards the town. You helped to defend this town and its inhabitants. Your actions are noble enough, though my father has asked to meet with you in person. Tundra is an important trading port for my family, and he wishes to meet the man who so fearlessly defended one of his assets. I'd be honored? Naruto said, not quite sure if it was a good thing. When does he want to meet with me? As soon as possible. I'll give you a lift back on my personal transport. Collect your things and give them to my men, they'll take care of them for you. Once I've acquired all the evidence I need for my report, we'll be on our way to Atlas. Thanks, Naruto replied, not quite sure how he felt about the whole thing. Chapter 3, White Rose. Mantle. Airship over Atlas. Naruto had to admit, when he decided to venture to Atlas he hadn't expected he'd be going there in style. Then again, considering he was traveling with an Atlas military specialist whose stiff, militaristic demeanor wasn't something she apparently turned off ever. It was certainly not his first choice when it came to travel options. Honestly, he'd rather deal with Maria again, knowing he'd be more prepared to handle that old woman than the one who currently sat across from him. Shortly after his actions at the port town, which ensured no collateral damage had been caused by the Grim, Specialist Winter Schnee had informed him his actions, once reported to her father, had intrigued the man enough that he wanted to meet with and possibly repay him for his actions. While Naruto had attempted to respectfully decline, the way Winter had looked at him and the tone she used when speaking with him implied he didn't have much of a choice in the matter. Soon after, his few possessions were collected and stowed aboard her personal airship, and he was given a seat next to the woman on board. Aside from Hirinmaru, which he kept on his person at all times, he didn't have access to any of his personal possessions. It made him a little nervous with only the tight hold he kept on his katana to keep him from losing himself to paranoia. So, Naruto was it? Where are you from? Winter suddenly asked, attempting to make some conversation during the trip. A small village in Mistral, he replied. His time amongst Raven's tribe had taught him that any mention of his village Konoha, or the fact that they were shinobi, would either be met with confused stares or people looking at him like he had a few screws loose. Alternatively, he knew better than to mention anything about being sheltered by bandits for a few years. From all the books he'd read regarding Atlas and its exploits, their impressive military power was something which stuck out, and told him that mentioning people who made a living by raiding nearby villages was probably a bad idea. I see. Where were you trained? I can't say that I've ever seen abilities such as yours, and certainly not from something as unassuming as a katana, Winter said, patting her own saber absent-mindedly as she spoke. I'm self-taught. We didn't have a formal school where I was from. You simply had to learn to survive. Interesting, she said, eyeing him suspiciously. And just where did you come across such a unique sword? I don't mean to pry, but it seems far beyond your capabilities to have had it commissioned or have created it yourself. It's a family heirloom. Had it as long as I can remember, he replied. That was as truthful as he could be, considering he'd woken up clutching the damn thing. So it was passed down to you by your parents? She inquired. Something like that, he said. My parents died not long after I was born. If they knew anything about the origins of my katana, they passed before they could share that with me. Oh, I see, she said, her tone becoming noticeably less intense. My apologies, I didn't mean to open old wounds, she replied. Don't worry about it. It's not something I dwell on much. I simply focus on achieving my goals and becoming someone the people of my village can respect. That is a noble venture, she replied, the ghost of a smile playing at the corner of her lips. Ma'am, we're coming up on Atlas, the pilot informed them from the cockpit. Have you ever seen the city? Winter asked. No, first time actually, he admitted. Then you'll want to look out that porthole. It's quite a sight, or so I've been told. Naruto wasn't quite sure what she meant by that comment, but he did as he was told regardless. For a moment his view was obscured by the clouds and Naruto couldn't see a thing. However, as his vision cleared, his mouth gaped open at the sight that greeted him. Atlas, as it would appear, was one city split into two separate locations. On the ground, settled between a large body of water and a mountain range, was a large city which no doubt began as the origins of Atlas in the early days of Mantle. However, floating several feet above it, situated just beneath the clouds, was a separate landmass. Winter wasn't kidding, Atlas was quite a sight to behold, especially because Naruto had never seen anything quite like it. A city, with a landmass completely separate from the other, attached to the lower landmass via a series of cables and a singular pole that ran their length separating the two. He could only wonder how they'd managed such a marvel, not to mention how they maintained it in the first place. Whatever it was had to be powerful, otherwise it could spell the end for the city entirely should its floating half fall into disrepair. Incredible, he breathed. Indeed, even when I was a child I couldn't help but marvel at the sight, Winter admitted. Unfortunately, it has since lost its luster. You grew up in Atlas? He asked. Yes, I was born and raised in the upper quarter, she replied. Naruto looked back out the porthole, looking to the city below and then the portion that floated above, putting two and two together. Wait, you used to live there? He asked, pointing to the floating island. Of course, I am a Shnee after all, she replied with a quirked eyebrow. Sorry, I didn't want to assume, he said, too embarrassed to admit he didn't know much about the Shnee family. Still, it seems a bit of a waste to make something like that simply to have a city exclusively for the upper crust. To be honest, that was never its initial intention, Winter replied. When it was first built, it was an experimental cityscape designed to offer the greatest protection from the Grimm. By creating a space that couldn't be accessed by any land-based Grimm and instead limiting the threats to more airborne varieties such as Nevermore and Griffins, we would be able to focus more on the city defenses and even have military assets that were capable of defending against the singular type of threat. I'm guessing that's not how things worked out, though, Naruto inserted. You'd be right. While the city is a technological marvel, the vast amounts of dust required to maintain the machines which enabled the city to float at such a high altitude was something that couldn't be duplicated for multiple installations. Even this singular one is unique as the dust provided for it comes exclusively from the Shnee Dust Company, ensuring my father has a great deal of power and sway in Atlas and could very well be the deciding factor of whether the city continues to float or comes crashing down on the citizens below. He can't, or at least I'd hope he wouldn't be so heartless, Naruto protested. Sadly, that's something I can't say for sure. While I'd like to say my father isn't the kind of man who'd allow his pride to determine whether the city gets the dust required to maintain its position, he's surprised me on so many occasions in the past that the only reason I can fathom he'd have for allowing it to remain is the simple fact that his home resides there and it would be too much effort to have everything transported elsewhere. I see, Naruto replied, gazing back at the structure with a great less enthusiasm as before. And this is the man who wants to reward me for protecting an important port city? Indeed, so I'd suggest being on your best behavior. He is a very prideful man and someone who easily takes offense, so watch what you say. I understand, Naruto replied. Indeed, Winter's warning did not fall on deaf ears. Naruto had, in the past, performed missions and been around people of great political status. Aside from Sokka's threats to pummel him into paste should he act out and say something rude to their host, he'd found it increasingly difficult to stomach the pompous attitudes of those who considered themselves to be of a higher class or born into a better family than they. He never understood how such people could exist. As far as he was concerned, one's family had nothing to do with your status in life. Life in Konoha had revolved about your abilities as a shinobi and the respect you received from your fellow comrades. His dream had always been to become the village Hokage, the village leader, which meant he would be in a position where he was the most respected and revered among everyone, not simply due to his birth but due to his skill. The fact that he was about to be hosted by someone like that, not to mention reside for a time in a city that was the very epitome of their egotistical philosophy, wasn't something that sat well with him, but which he nonetheless began mentally preparing himself for. Hopefully he wouldn't be here very long, and he could get on with his journey. The airship settled gently on the ground, Winter standing tall and erect as she waited for the ramp to lower and allow her to dismount. Naruto stood loosely next to her, wondering to himself what he should expect. Needless to say, it came as a major surprise to the young man when the ramp lowered and he was greeted by the sight of 2 lines of security guards, all of whom worked for the SDC. If the snowflake emblem emblazoned over their heart was any indication, their armor, a mixture of sky blue and pristine white, almost blended in with the white background of the world around them. It really didn't surprise Naruto that, even at this height, there would be snow covering everything. While he was sure the people of Atlas had managed to figure out how to prevent it from accumulating so quickly, he simply figured they'd learn to deal with it, instead finding ways to make it work with the overall aesthetic of the city. He followed Winter down as the guards made a quick, synchronized maneuver that brought them all to attention. They remained as such until the two of them reached a limousine that had been sent for them, with Naruto having a bit of a struggle as he tried to slip in easily with Hyarinmaru still attached to his hip. Winter had managed to do it with her saber, making the action look easy and seamless. He looked like a complete idiot, and, after a few moments of fumbling, gave up and laid his sword across his lap as he took a seat opposite the specialist. As soon as they were comfortable, they were moving again, the airstrip quickly disappearing from their view as they made their way into the city proper. Looking out the window, Naruto could see from the buildings and the people walking the streets that this was a culture completely different from his own. The clothes looked expensive as hell, with many of them seeming to almost be inlaid with some measure of gold or silver in the fabric. Every woman was decked out with some sort of jewels that must have a cost a fortune, and they walked in a manner that seemed to say they owned the very ground they trod on. It made him feel uncomfortable just watching them, knowing all too well that, if he were to step foot out there dressed as he was, they'd no doubt give him looks that suggested they thought he might be harboring some sort of terminal disease. He was thankful then to be inside a limo with tinted windows, ensuring he could see them perfectly but not the other way around. There are some things you should know before you meet my father, Winter said, garnering his attention. My father is a very wealthy and powerful man. He holds a great deal of influence not only here in Atlas but in many other parts of Remnant. When you meet him, though he'll be cordial with you, you may feel that he's looking down on you. Because he is, Naruto concluded, catching Winter off guard. Don't worry, I know better than to act out. Best thing for me is to simply stay out of his way and take everything he says with a grain of salt. Am I right? Indeed, she said, quickly regaining her composure. You'll be expected to meet with him, receive his thanks as well as a reward, and attend an after-party he'll be hosting. Don't worry, you won't be expected to mingle with anyone. He'll politely mention your contribution to our family, but aside from that he'll expect nothing else. We'll also see to providing you with a suit to wear to the occasion. I understand, Naruto replied, returning his gaze to the world outside. It's a depressing sight, isn't it? Winter asked, her question causing Naruto to glance her way in confusion. I grew up in this place and yet, despite all that time walking amongst them, I never once felt like I belong. There was a certain perspective you had to have to walk amongst these people. I never had it, and frankly the price to attain their acceptance always seemed too high to me. She glanced over at Naruto and started chuckling softly to herself once she saw his expression. My apologies, I suppose I was feeling a bit melancholy. I wouldn't expect for you to know what it feels like to grow up the way I did. If there is one thing I admired about the cultures outside of Atlas, it was how much more honest people were about themselves and each other. Actually, I know all too well what you mean, Naruto replied, eliciting a look of surprise from her. Where I grew up, due to the circumstances surrounding my birth, I was considered an outcast by my village. I never knew my parents, and it would be years before I started finding pieces of the actual truth. My apologies, I had no idea, Winter said. Don't worry about it. I know they sometimes say that ignorance is bliss, but for me, that never felt right. I'd rather know the full truth, regardless of how bad it may be, than be kept in the dark all my life, he replied. I agree, Winter said, a small smirk gracing her lips. Before long the limo reached its destination, entering through a pair of large, white gates marked with a large W atop them. Naruto gazed out his window at the immaculate shrubbery, lawn and trees that lay on the grounds. It was a work of art, by any definition, and certainly one that must have cost a fortune to maintain. The path they were on was made of white marble stones, many of which crunched beneath the weight of their ride as they were propelled to the entrance of the mansion. As it slowed to their destination, Naruto could see another fleet people, this time servants, lining the path up towards the doors of the large building. He was beginning to see a pattern, something which didn't sit well with him. As soon as the limo stopped, Winter made her way out with Naruto following close behind. The servants, who had been standing tall and erect, bowed slightly as she made her way down the path towards the door. Naruto couldn't help but gaze at the numerous men and women who lined the path, each of them decked out in a uniform of sky blue and white with the Schnee family crest emblazoned over their hearts. It was something he figured he'd see a great deal of during his time here. No doubt the Schnee family made sure everything they produced had their family crest on it. Come to think of it, would that also extend to toilet paper? He thought about it, picturing sky blue toilet paper with a white snowflake on each individual square. He chuckled at the image, but quickly composed himself when Winter glanced back at him to see what he'd found so amusing. Winter, it's so good to see you, a man said as they approached the mansion. You as well, Klein, Winter said as she gave the man a hug. Naruto watched as she embraced a man with a light brown mustache and hair, much of which had migrated to the outer edges of his head. While he would have thought the man was her father, the way she acted around him, not to mention his uniform, told him he was wrong. The man was no doubt one of the many butlers her family employed and obviously someone very close to Winter. He was certainly someone he could trust, as her unhesitant willingness to hug him, an act that seemed completely foreign for the militaristic woman, was no doubt steeped in years of trust and loyalty he'd earned from her. Uzumaki Naruto, allow me to introduce Klein. He's the head butler of my father's estate. Should you need anything, just find Klein and he'll give you all the assistance that you require. Good to know. Nice to meet you, Klein, Naruto said, accepting the man's offer to shake hands. You as well, Master Uzumaki. Don't worry, Winter informed me of you prior to her arrival along with your measurements, he said with a wink. My measurements? He asked, more disturbed by that small bit of information than the fact that the man already knew his name. For your suit. The one you'll be wearing at this evening gala, he informed him. Oh, he said, giving Winter an uneasy look as he contemplated how she'd managed to get those. Please follow me. Your father is already awaiting you in his study. Naruto soon realized that, just as the grounds of the mansion were a sight to behold, so too were the halls housed within. The floors and walls were spotless, made from something that looked a great deal like marble. The theme of sky blue and white continued, with most of the walls either being taken up by windows, tapestries, or expensive paintings. Occasionally they'd pass a large open room where he would see a massive statue erected within, or several musical instruments, many of which Naruto wasn't aware of the name of. Only once did he see a family portrait depicting the whole of the Schnee family. While many others he'd seen in the past all contained smiling faces, only the young boy seated on his mother's lap held a smile, no doubt Winter's younger brother. All the women held frowns while their father had a more serious expression on his face. It was very telling of the state of affairs in their household. "One moment please," Klein said as they stood outside a large oaken door. Klein knocked a couple times before entering. There was some muffled conversation from inside before he returned, motioning for them to follow him inside. As soon as they entered, Naruto was struck by how different the room was from the rest of the mansion. Both sides of the room had been converted into bookshelves from which not only books sat but various trinkets and awards. A couch sat across from a pair of armchairs with a table in the middle upon which he could see a chessboard and a couple glasses next to a much larger one containing some dark amber liquid. Winter's father sat behind his desk, his white hair and mustache a near identical match to his daughter's, though the large portrait that sat on the wall behind him showed he'd looked much different in his younger days. The fact that the man had a portrait of himself was a bit disconcerting for him, especially considering the man's poor reputation outside of Atlas. So this is the young man I have to thank for protecting our assets," he said, walking around his desk to shake Naruto's hand. "I did what I could. Your daughter, along with her forces, did the heavy lifting. I mostly kept the Grim at bay for a while," he replied, shaking the hand that was offered. "Skilled and humble, very noble attributes. Well, all things considered, your actions have won you my respect as well as my admiration. I'd like you to be our guest of honor this evening. We'll be holding a small gala among which we'll have many of Atlas' most influential families and politicians in attendance." "I'd be honored to, sir," he replied, recalling how Winter had stated he wouldn't have much choice in the matter otherwise. "Excellent. I've had Klein set a room aside for you to rest and refresh yourself in preparation for this evening. I'll have you go with him. Your suit should be arriving shortly as well." At this Klein reappeared, gesturing for him to follow. Naruto did so, eager to leave the man's presence and a little disappointed to see that Winter had left as well, leaving him all by his lonesome. It didn't take long for them to reach his room, a small guest room as Klein informed him. As soon as he opened the door, Naruto wondered if the man had been mistaken. Needless to say, while it may have been humble by their standards, everything inside looked so expensive he was afraid to touch anything for fear it might cost him an arm and a leg. Everything from the bedsheets, the dresser, the desk, the chairs, and even the window shades were stylized in the Shin's signature look. He could feel the wealth radiating off of everything. "We'll have your suit ready for you shortly. I'll make sure to knock a few times to alert you to my presence." "Thanks," he managed to say before the door shut. Left all to himself, Naruto could only think of doing one thing. Finding a comfortable area in the room, far from any of the furniture, he settled himself down, placing Hirinmaru in his lap as he began to meditate. With practiced ease he slipped from the conscious world, feeling it dissipate around him as it was replaced by the white landscape of Hirinmaru's. He almost laughed, finding it somewhat amusing that, while his mind was no longer in Atlas, the view hadn't changed from his current lodgings. Still, he needed only to gaze upon the floating form of the ice dragon as well as the relaxed form of Kurama, the nine-tailed fox demon. "So guys, what do you think?" "Humph, what do we care about the business of mortals?" Kurama asked, much to Naruto's annoyance. "He has a point, Naruto. Whatever business you conduct with these men is yours and yours alone to worry about. We are merely along for the ride, helping you to achieve your goals where we can," Hirinmaru added. "I understand that, but I'm serious here. I need your advice. Jacques Cheny is a powerful man and the people I'll be meeting at this gala or whatever will no doubt be similar. I need to know who I can trust. I don't want to throw my lot in with just anyone." "That is a fair point, and it is wise that you would place your faith in our judgment," Hirinmaru replied thoughtfully. "His daughter, Winter, is certainly one with a noble soul. You would do well to count her among your friends. Her father is decidedly less so. I don't sense much good coming from him. It would certainly be easier for us to judge the others once you're around them. I'll keep my eyes and ears open for anyone of interest at this party of theirs, but don't expect me to be constantly advising you on who to rub elbows with and who to avoid. I'll let you know who I like, and when I remain silent that should let you know who's not worth our time," Kurama stated. "Indeed. All right then. Thanks for your help. I'll make sure to keep your interests in mind. Hopefully we can find some powerful friends who can help us find a way back home." Naruto tugged at his suit collar, feeling like the damn thing was attempting to strangle him to death. He felt quite out of place, not only due to the suit he was forced to wear but also from the atmosphere of the gala itself. His only solace came in the fact that Jacques Cheny had allowed him to carry Hirinmaru with him, often referring to him as he led him from one business partner to the next, introducing him before diving into a conversation that he'd long since given up on attempting to follow. All throughout the night he met one person after the next, plastering on a smile as he struggled to breath against his collar while Jacques and his friends chatted away about something he couldn't care less about. While he'd asked Kurama and Hirinmaru to let him know about anyone of interest, he wasn't surprised that the two had remained silent all through the night. It had become painfully obvious to him that all these people cared about was their money, power, and how society saw them. He wanted to gauge and, finding an opportunity to slip away, quickly excused himself to go outside and get some air. The cool, crisp air greeted him, setting a definite shift in atmosphere with how warm it had been inside. Naruto welcomed the change, finally feeling like he could breathe now that he was away from everyone. While he planned to spend some time in Atlas, his time here all but confirmed that he'd be hopping a transport out of here soon, possibly towards Vale if he could manage. He felt very out of place, being passed around as a trophy for people to admire but otherwise not care about. It was disgusting to say the least. The sooner he could leave this place behind the better. As he basked in the silence of the open balcony, his attention was drawn to the sound of someone cutting through the air. He looked around, confused, before his eyes were drawn to the courtyard down below. Down the flight of steps leading out into an open courtyard where a frozen fountain with a large snowflake set in the middle stood was a young girl with stark white hair. She was dressed in what appeared to be a skirt along with a short jacket and matching heel boots. In her hand she grasped what appeared to a rapier with a larger cylinder attached to the handle. She moved back and forth, her actions appearing to almost flow like a dance, as she slashed at invisible opponents. He was mesmerized, so much so that he didn't realize he descended the stairs to watch her. As she felled another opponent, her gaze shifted to him, glaring balefully. "Can I help you?" she snipped. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just impressed with your skills," he commented, receiving a questioning glare from the girl. "My name's Uzumaki Naruto, by the way." "Oh, you're the boy who father claims saved the shipping port," she replied. "Father? You mean Shock? Of course, you dolt, he's my father. I am Wise Schnee, Harrius of the Schnee Dust Company." Winter never mentioned she had a sister, he mused. "You know my sister?" she asked, her expression softening from her surprise. "Yeah, she gave me a lift here actually. Truth be told, she was the one who saved the shipping port. All I did was erect an ice wall and killed a Goliath that broke through." "You killed a Goliath all on your own?" she asked, her gaze washing over him as she eyed his katana strapped to his waist. "Well, yeah, is that surprising?" he asked. She hummed. "I take it then you consider yourself quite skilled." "I'm skilled enough to survive, I suppose." "Well then, would you care for a spare?" she asked. "That's the best thing I've heard all night," he said, quickly shedding his coat as he rolled up his sleeves and undid his collar. Weiss took notice of his muscles, not overly developed but enough to draw the eye and showcase that he wasn't a slouch. He drew out his katana, taking a stance opposite her own as they prepared. "Ready?" she asked. "One moment," he said with a smirk before reciting, "Rise over the frosted heavens, Hyarinmaru." She shielded her eyes as a blast of snow blinded her for just a moment. As soon as she regained her composure, she looked quizzically at the blade he was holding. The shabby-looking katana had changed somehow, the hilt having gained a second guard that looked like a star and a long chain attached to a crescent moon charm hung from the bottom of the handle. She wasn't quite sure how it had happened. His semblance perhaps? Certainly a strange one, especially with how it had changed his sword's appearance. Perhaps it was unique in that fashion, something that allowed the boy to take shabby weapons and make them like new again, throwing his opponents off guard when they attacked, thinking his old shabby weapon would break only to have him give it new life and a sharper edge. Clearly she'd have to be mindful while fighting him. "Ready when you are," he said with a smirk. Weiss didn't speak, summoning a glyph beneath her feet that propelled her backwards. A seconded one appeared and she rocketed forward, catching Naruto off guard but not enough for him to react. He brought Hyarinmaru up and heard the distinct clang, as metal struck metal. In an instant she was gone, having retreated once more, but in her place icicles began shooting out at him. Naruto dodged to the side, swiping Hyarinmaru in a motion that brought up a wall of ice to cover his escape. Weiss was surprised by the motion, having only seen her sister and herself use such a tactic. She spun the dust cartridges, choosing something appropriate, and sent a wave of fire in his direction. The wall didn't last very long, having been hastily made, and it quickly melted under her barrage. "Hyarinmaru, I need cover," he said. "As you wish, Naruto," his companion answered. He slashed horizontally, causing a blast of wind to flow over the area. Weiss recoiled from the cold, feeling the wind whip past her as a thick fog rolled in along with it, obscuring her vision. Naruto smiled to himself. Now he was in his element. With the fog cover he'd have an easier time to slip into her guard without her noticing, but he'd have to work fast. "Kurama, you're up. I'll need to borrow some of your chakra for this." "Don't waste it," the demon growled. Knowing all too well that her opponent intended to use the fog as cover, Weiss spun the dust cartridges again, settling this time on wind. With a quick swipe of her rapier she blew the fog away, revealing a completely empty courtyard. She looked around, perplexed by what she saw, but her eyes didn't lie to her. The courtyard was empty, completely devoid of anyone but herself, just as it had been before Naruto's arrival. She kept her guard up, though, quickly looking around to try and find him. He had been clever, but there were only so many places he could hide, but just where had he gone? A steady rumbling at her feet drew her attention. Confused, she gazed at the ground, wondering if something big was headed this way. She soon realized she was mistaken as a blade shot up out of the ground. She cried out, attempting to get away but slipping on the rubble and collapsing unceremoniously onto the ground. Before she could rise to her feet, however, Naruto's blade was already tickling her throat. She looked up at the boy, his hair and shirt matted with dirt. He'd somehow managed to dive underground without her noticing and come up beneath her. A clever tactic to be sure, possibly something tied to his semblance. While he wore a serious expression, it quickly broke into a smile as he sheathed his sword and offered her his dirty hand. She hesitated for a moment before accepting it, and felt the boy effortlessly raised her to her feet. "That was excellent," he said, laughing as he spoke. "You really had me on the back foot. I had to think outside the box quick, otherwise I would have lost to you in a matter of moments," he said, praising her all the while. "I was trained by my sister Winter." She would have expected nothing less, she replied. "I can tell. You're incredibly skilled." "I'll have to really work to improve myself so I can challenge you again sometime," he said with an easy smile. "I'll look forward to it," Weiss replied, somehow feeling happy to hear him say that. She wasn't a stranger to hearing boys compliment her, but it was always hollow, as they simply said things to try and gain her favor and by extension her father's. This boy's words, however, felt genuine, something she wasn't at all used to and certainly not something she had been prepared for. She also wasn't prepared for the storm that descended upon them in the form of her enraged father. "What is going on here?" he bellowed, his gaze falling on Weiss before looking over Naruto's soiled clothes and finally settling on the large hole in the ground. "Explain, Father," she started, struggling to find the words. "It's my fault, sir," Naruto said, stepping in to block her form with his own. "Weiss didn't cause any of this. I saw her practicing from up on the balcony and asked her to spar with me. I kind of got carried away," he said, smiling sheepishly as he glanced back at the large hole. "Whatever damages I've caused, I'll gladly pay for them and repair anything I can." Shock eyed him for a moment before glancing back to Weiss. While the heat in his eyes had smoldered somewhat, there was no doubt he'd have words for her later. "That won't be necessary. You are my honored guest, after all, so I don't see the harm in overlooking this small matter. I'll trust that you'll refrain from causing any more damage to my estate." "Of course," he replied. "Good. Come, we'll need to get you cleaned up. I have a very important guest who'd like to meet with you and we shouldn't keep him waiting." Naruto glanced back to Weiss, offering her a warm smile. "Sorry about that. You needn't worry. I have no need of protection, especially from my own father," she replied in retort. "I don't doubt that, but I wasn't about to let you take the fall for my actions. Guess we'll have to have that rematch some other time." "Of course, but don't expect me to go easy on you next time," she replied. "I look forward to it," he replied with an easy smile. Weiss watched as he walked off, a small smile forming on her face. Uzumaki Naruto. Certainly an interesting person. One to keep an eye on for sure. He was good enough to catch Winter's eye at the very least. Perhaps she should ask her opinion on him? If only to gauge her overall appraisal of his skills, to be sure. Naruto sighed happily, glad to be out of that stuffy suit and back into some more casual wear. The suit had been fine as far as he was concerned. Just needed to be dusted off and it would be good to go. Shock, on the other hand, had proclaimed it was ruined and promptly had it disposed of. He wondered if the man hadn't already planned on doing the exact same thing shortly after he'd departed. Well, it didn't matter now. With Hyarimura strapped to his side, he made his way towards Shock's office to meet with his guest. He'd thankfully memorized the route, so there had been no need for him to ask Klein for assistance. Before long he stood outside, knocked 3 times just as Klein had, and promptly let himself inside. He was immediately elated to see a familiar face in that of Winter Schnee. While their relationship was more an acquaintanceship than an actual friendship, simply having someone he felt he could relatively trust in the room helped him to feel a bit more at ease. Unsurprisingly, Jacques Schnee was also present, sitting behind his desk. The only other person in the room was a tall gentleman dressed in military garb similar to Winter's. Despite the fact he was sitting, Naruto could tell he was a rather large man. He had sharp features, a clean haircut, and a small metal strip just above his left eyebrow. His hands were gloved, something which he found odd, but he held a warm smile that helped him feel more at ease. The man immediately rose when he entered, showing off his impressive height before crossing the room to meet him. "Good evening, young man. I'm General James Ironwood of the Atlas Military," he said, extending his hand. "Uzumaki Naruto," he replied, taking the man's hand in his own. He was instantly caught off guard by the unnatural firmness of his shake. It wasn't due to his muscular hand but more of it feeling like it was hard as a rock or metal. Ironwood must have noticed, chuckling to himself as Naruto's cheeks turned red from embarrassment. "Don't worry, I get that reaction a lot." "An old war wound," he replied before motioning for Naruto to take a seat at one of the available chairs. "So, Specialist Winter tells me you assisted in the defense of the shipping port during the grim incursion last night. She gives me more credit than I'm due. I hardly did anything. Winter and her team did most of the heavy lifting." "That may be so, but I have several eyewitness accounts that say you didn't hesitate to act in defense of the town and its people. You leapt into action, erecting a wall of ice and even managed to single-handedly eliminate a Goliath on your own. Not many people your age could make such a claim. More than a few are capable of taking on Beowulfs and even Ursa, but a Goliath is another class of grim entirely." "I got lucky," he replied. "I don't believe in luck. I believe in skill, something which you showed a great deal of," he replied, his eyes wandering to the sword at his hip. "Is that your weapon of choice?" "Yes, it's called Hyarimura. May I examine it?" Naruto hesitated for a moment, his hand slipping to the hilt as he established a connection between himself and Hyarimura. "Hyarimura, will you let him see you or are you going to act out again? I sense a noble soul within this one." He may examine me, but he shouldn't expect anything more from me, the Frost Dragon replied. Good enough, he said, removing it from his hip. Have a look, General. Ironwood nodded his affirmation as he took the sword from him before removing the katana from its sheath. He examined the blade, his eyes roving every inch of it as Naruto tensed. While he trusted Hirinra to keep his word that he wouldn't act aggressively towards the man, he wasn't sure his word would stand should the general begin to examine it more extensively. After a while his expression showed that he was satisfied, and he replaced the blade back within its sheath before handing it back to Naruto. It's a beautiful blade. Where did you get it? Family heirloom. Been with us for generations, Naruto replied, reciting the same half-truth he'd come to rely on whenever someone asked him that question. I see. It's in exquisite condition despite its age and the amount of use it's seen. How does it work? I didn't see anywhere for you to insert ice dust. I'm not quite sure myself. With how old it is, I think that knowledge has been lost to the ages. I prefer to simply think of it as being something more spiritual than anything else. Hilarious, Hirinra grumbled. Indeed. I also have to wonder where you learned to fight like you did. You obviously showed a lot of skill and a great deal of potential. Who did you train under? Was it your parents? No, actually, they passed away shortly after I was born, he replied. The man's expression softened to one of understand, as did Winter's. My apologies. You've obviously done well for yourself. James, if you could get to the point of your invitation. I have other business I need to see to, Jacques interrupted, showing little concern for the subject matter. Of course, Ironwood replied, showing no signs that he was annoyed or insulted by his interruption. Naruto, have you heard of the 4 Huntsman Academies of Remnant? Yeah, there's Beacon in Vale, Shade in Vacuo, Haven in Mistral, and the Atlas Academy here. Indeed. Many people know of these academies as well as the men and women who run them. I myself, apart from being the general of the Atlas military, am also the headmaster of the academy. As such, I'm always on the lookout for promising young men and women who show the potential to become great huntsmen and huntresses. And this is your pitch to have me join the academy, Naruto concluded. Exactly, he replied, offering a pleased smile. It's a generous offer, General, but I'm only 16. I thought you had to be 17 to apply. Acceptations have been made in the past for individuals who show incredible skill. Your performance at the port town was more than enough to garner my attention. I understand, General, and I thank you for your offer, Naruto began. I'm sensing a but somewhere, he replied, but I wasn't planning on spending an extensive amount of time here in Atlas. I was originally planning on heading to Vale after this as part of my training. I see. Well then perhaps I could offer you my assistance in getting you there. I can have a shuttle prepped and ready to depart whenever you need it. Thank you, General, that's very kind of you. Don't mention it. I'd still like you to keep my offer in mind. If not for you to join my academy, then perhaps Beacon? Headmaster Ashman and I are good friends. I could send him a recommendation to ensure you have a place on the list of next year's initiates. I'll keep that in mind, Naruto said, shaking the man's hand. Well then, Uzumaki Naruto, I wish you the best on your journey. Hopefully we'll meet again soon. Vale, 6 months later. Cold. Why did it have to be cold? He could understand Atlas. Atlas was always cold. For anyone who hadn't been there, it was a winter wonderland, but for those who have, such as himself, it was a frozen fucking tundra, and that went double for its people. The moment he sat down in Vale, he wondered if there was some great deity he'd somehow managed to piss off that not only found him spending time in the coldest place on Remnant, but also a less intense but just as frigid winter here in Vale. He'd heard from Raven that some of Remnant's oldest legends professed that their world had been made by 2 brother gods, one of light and one of darkness. He figured he'd either pissed them off or somehow was seen as the latter god's form of amusement. As far as he was concerned, they were the exact same. The real icing on the cake was the overall fact that he was in possession of a sword that attacked using ice. While it might have been useful in the warmer months, Naruto couldn't help himself from thinking how much nicer it might have been to have a fire deity instead. Maybe he should have gone on to Vacuo? Sure, it was one giant litter box, but at least it was warm during the day. As he trudged on through the snow, praying, he came upon some sign that he was nearing a village. His attention was drawn to a familiar sound. Wolves, specifically Beowulfs, were howling and growling aggressively. What's more, he could hear gunshots, a telltale sign that someone was fighting them. Unwilling to leave anyone on their own against grim attacks, and hoping the fight might do something to help warm him up, Naruto began sprinting towards the sound. He didn't have to go very far when he came upon the ensuing battle, and what he saw was nothing short of impressive. A young girl, younger than himself as far as he could tell, dressed in an assortment of black and red with a long flowing cape behind her, danced through the juvenile Beowulfs like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not a single movement was wasted, each one transitioning into another or otherwise acting as the springboard for the next counterattack. Even the shots from her weapon, some of which weren't meant for the Grimm themselves, acted as the catalyst to an attack that eliminated them or helped her to dodge an oncoming attack. As soon as it had begun, she landed on the ground with the shell casings from her weapon falling all around her. It was a picture-perfect moment, one where Naruto couldn't help but applaud. Apparently she hadn't been expecting such a reaction, as she quickly became aware of her audience, squeaked, and stumbled unceremoniously onto her rump. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to scare you," he said, rushing over to help the girl to her feet. It's all right, she said, accepting his hand as he helped her to her feet. How long were you standing there? Long enough. I saw the whole thing. You were incredible, he praised. Thanks, she said, her face quickly turning the exact shade of red as her cape. I'm Ruby Rose, nice to meet you. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. The pleasure is mine, he said, taking her hand and giving it a shake. I'm surprised to see anyone out here. Were you visiting someone? Yeah, I was just on my way back from visiting my mother's grave. Oh, I'm so sorry, he replied, his smile drooping a little. It's all right. She passed away when I was really young, so I don't miss her too much. She was a huntress. I'm going to be one just like her. Well, if that display you put on is anything to go by, then I'd say you're well on your way to achieving that goal. Thank you, Ruby said, blushing once more from the naked praise. Are you a huntsman? Huh, your sword, is it your huntsman weapon? She asked, motioning to Hyarimuru strapped to his waist. Oh no, I'm not a huntsman. Are you enrolled in one of the schools? I go to Signal, where my dad and Uncle Crow teach. My sister is going to Beacon this year, and I'll be going there in a couple years. I keep hearing about Beacon. Maybe it's the universe's way of trying to tell me I should enroll, he said sarcastically. Oh, you should, it would be so awesome. Ruby cried. You could meet my sister, and then I'd have 2 people I know there when I enroll. Sure, I'll keep it in mind, he said, leaning back from a starry-eyed Ruby. Where were you headed anyway? She asked. You know, I've been asking myself the same thing for a while now. Mostly I've just been looking for some sign of civilization. Oh, you could come to my house. It's warm and you could meet my dad and Zwei, that's our dog. He's super cute and he'd love you. Yeah, sure, that sounds Giari, look out. Naruto yelled, throwing Ruby to the side before back-flipping out of the way. Naruto had evaded the attack just in time. A large paw, encased in bone and attached to a menacing-looking Beowulf, growled as it eyed its prey. Naruto drew Hyarimuru from its sheath, staring back at his opponent. The Beowulf was much more deadly than the juveniles Ruby had easily dispatched just moments before. This one was an alpha, a Beowulf that had either outlasted, evaded, or killed every huntsman who tried to take it down during its lifetime. All the experience it had gained throughout the years had made it into a huntsman-killing machine with a body encased in bone armor, and an intellect that made it a cunning opponent. Unfortunately for it, Naruto was not the average huntsman. With Hyarimuru in his hands, he easily batted aside its paws as it attempted to shear his head from his shoulders. The attacks were powerful, easily pushing Naruto back as he deflected the attacks to the side. While he attempted to find himself an opening, he soon found himself aided by Ruby, who began pelting the creature with sniper fire. Unfortunately, her attacks only served to annoy it, drawing its attention to her. With it distracted, he swiped Hyarimuru and caused a layer of ice to form around its legs, cementing it to the ground. This drew its attention back to him, and as it attempted to shear the ice from its legs, Hyarimuru soon proved tenacious as he caused its paws to become encased in ice as well, leaving it in a very vulnerable state. Kurama, give me a boost, just to my legs. Alright, but don't going asking for any more favors without a good reason. Noted. Naruto felt the surge of energy in his legs as Kurama poured a small amount of chakra into them. Taking a stance, he flew forward, reaching a speed that seemed to rival Ruby's own semblance. As the alpha opened its mouth to roar at him, it soon found its head in 2 pieces, split down the middle of its jaw. It fell just a few feet from its frozen corpse, dissolving into nothingness as Naruto flicked the blade, sending black grime onto the snow before putting Hyarimuru back into his sheath. Relaxing now that the battle was over, he was greeted by a star-struck Ruby Rose who was gazing up at him like he was a celebrity off of a movie set. That was awesome, she squealed. Thanks? He said. That was incredible. How did you freeze it like that? Does your blade have a dust injector in it, or is that your semblance? How did you move so fast? Her questions came at a mile a minute, leaving Naruto unsure of how to answer. Whoa, hold on. Can we at least get inside where it's warm before you start asking me 20 questions? Oh yeah, sure, follow me, she said. It didn't take them too long to reach Ruby's home. It was the greatest thing he'd ever seen, mostly because he'd been camping out in the snow with only the occasional settlement with an inn for him to sleep at. His shinobi training had come in handy, especially when finding or making himself a shelter, but the fact that he was able to spend some time in an actual house for once was the greatest thing in the world to him at the moment. Ruby let them inside and he was instantly hit with a wave of warm air. His skin prickled at the sudden change in temperature, but he could already feel his aching and frozen joints beginning to loosen up as they welcomed the warmer climate. Go ahead and have a seat on the couch. I'll get us something to eat, Ruby said as she stepped through a doorway which he assumed led to the kitchen. Naruto did as he was told, plopping down onto the soft cushions and basking in their soft, enveloping touch. He glanced around the room, taking in the home that had been built to look like a log cabin. Aside from its exterior, the interior looking nothing like what one would expect from a log cabin. For one thing, there were 2 floors, not to mention carpeting, electricity, and plumbing. It was also decorated with pictures of family members, friends, and other huntsman memorabilia. He glanced around, taking it all in, when one picture in particular caught his attention. Rising from his seat, he walked over to the mantel, gazing at the picture with a strange sense of déjà vu. The girl pictured was tall, a little shorter than himself but still a good height for her age. She had lilac eyes and long blonde hair that fell in a curly waterfall down to her lower back. Her bright smile drew his eyes, as did her generous assets, though either of those were what had garnered his attention. He couldn't be certain, but the girl pictured reminded him an awful lot of Raven. Just darken her eyes to red and dye her hair black, and she could be her spitting image. He was about to ask Ruby who she was when he felt another presence standing behind him, and he turned to regard them. Naruto almost flinched as he stared into the well-toned chest of a tall blonde man. His hair was short, sitting just above his blue eyes that bore into him with an intense aura. His exposed arms showed off his toned muscles as they were crossed over his chest, making him appear even more intimidating than at first glance. Naruto could already tell he'd stumbled into a bad situation, and would need to act fast to get himself out of it. Hello, he said, his simple greeting somehow causing the man's eyes to narrow with suspicion. What are you doing in my home? He asked. This is your home? He asked, the glare he received telling him that was a stupid question. I was invited here. Invited? By whom? He challenged. Hey Dad, didn't realize you were home, Ruby said, walking into the room with a plate full of cookies and 2 glasses of milk. This is my friend Naruto. Hello again, he said, seeing the man's gaze lessen, if only a little. Ruby, your friend is a boy, he pointed out. Yeah, I know, she said nonchalantly. How did you two meet? This afternoon, when I was walking home from visiting Mom and was attacked by Beowulfs. Maybe you should tell me the whole story, he suggested. Settling themselves on the couch, Ruby began to recount the events that had led to them meeting. While her story was greatly over-exaggerated, complete with sound effects and dialogue that he doubted the Grimm were capable of producing, he nonetheless kept quiet during the whole affair. It was only after he was introduced into the story that Naruto found her father, Taiyang as he was called, turning his gaze on him. He was obviously a protective father, something Naruto could appreciate and respect, but not if it entailed him coming to bodily harm or worse, death. Still, his part in aiding and even defending Ruby's life against that of an alpha Beowulf was enough to convince the man he was of noble character. That and the fact that their Korgisvai had taken a liking to him, laying in his lap while he scratched his ears. So, Naruto, where are you from? He asked. A little village out in Nostral, no place you'd have heard of. And you want to become a huntsman? He asked. I'm honestly not sure, he admitted. If you're not sure, then why do you carry a huntsman's weapon? He asked, motioning to his katana. It's a family heirloom. It's something I've always had. Mastering it has simply helped me to survive. And your family? They passed away when I was still an infant. I don't know much about them, he replied. Oh, I'm so sorry, Tai said, his intense gaze lessening at that. I lost my wife several years ago. It's never easy dealing with the loss of someone you love, he said, Ruby taking his hand and giving it a comforting squeeze. Naruto, do you have any place to stay? Ruby asked. I figured I'd find an inn or a hotel to crash in tonight, he replied. Oh, he can stay here, can he, Dad? Ruby asked, pleading with her father. I don't want to impose, sir, he said, already dreading being in her father's crosshairs once more. I suppose we can put you up for the night, as a way of thanking you for helping Ruby out, he said. Late in the night, the whole house was asleep save for 2 individuals. Naruto, along with Zwei, sat downstairs, looking out onto Patch through the window. With the dog curled up in his lap, Naruto gently stroked his fur, contemplating his next move. Ever since he'd come to this world, Naruto had been faced with one challenge after another. More often than not, he had been forced to conceal his abilities, playing off Hyarinmaru as a huntsman's weapon capable of generating ice through dust. It is becoming more and more difficult to maintain this lie, especially given the people he'd met along the way who were huntsmen in one way or another, such as Raven, Ironwood, and now Taiyang. To say that the possibility of being able to keep everyone in the dark as an impossible task was an understatement. At some point someone was going to realize Hyarinmaru wasn't an ordinary huntsman's weapon, and with that revelation would come a whole heap of questions he either couldn't or didn't want to answer. The only problem now lay in where he went from here. Having trouble sleeping? He heard someone ask. Naruto's head audibly cracked as he spun his neck around. He looked up into the face of Taiyang, dressed in a shirt and basketball shorts, and wearing a surprisingly warm smile. He didn't let down his guard for a second, however, as he still recalled how the man's eyes had bored their way into his skull that afternoon. Yeah, just hanging out with Zwei, he said nervously, the dog leaving his lap to go up and greet his master. You can relax, Naruto, I'm just here to talk, Tai said, settling himself down next to the boy. I only give guys the 3rd degree when it comes to my daughters. I'm very protective of them, have been since they were little. I understand, Naruto replied, relaxing a little. So, what's on your mind that's been keeping you up so late at night? Just considering my next move, he replied honestly. I've been traveling Remnant for the past year, searching for something, helping people where I can. It's not a bad life, but it hasn't given me what I want, what I need. What is it you want? Tai asked. How to get home. How to get back to the people I care about. I made a promise, one I want to keep, but I'm not sure where to even begin searching. I'd hoped something would pop out at me along my journey, but so far I've only found myself with more questions than answers. Maybe you've been looking in the wrong place, Tai said, earning a quizzical look from Naruto. While I do admit that traveling across Remnant is a good way to start searching for answers, you obviously don't know what answers you're looking for or how to even recognize them when they make themselves known to you. Perhaps instead you should consider a place where you can both search for answers while also learning how to recognize them, among other things. You talking about Beacon? Naruto asked, already knowing where this conversation was going. It wouldn't be a bad start, yes, and it's simply one of several places you could begin your search at. Naruto took a moment to consider what Tai was saying. The man wasn't wrong. Schools were specifically designed to help people learn, grow, and experiment with their knowledge and skills. Furthermore, it would also give him a great starting point as he'd be able to learn more about this world than by simply traveling around looking for answers. The only problem he had was the fact that joining Beacon was a 4-year commitment, and that wasn't even taking into consideration the fact that he had to pass an initiation process first. Still, he'd already spent nearly 4 years here already. For years Sasuke had been allowing himself to disappear, far from Naruto's ability to track him down and convince him to come home. By the time he found a way back he could be far more powerful and dangerous than he was when they'd last fought, a problem he'd need to rectify if he had any chance of fulfilling his promise to Sakura. You know, you're the third person I've met who's spoken to me about the Huntsman Academies. Perhaps it's time I seriously consider them? I can help you on that front. I'm a teacher over at Signal and a former Beacon graduate. I can make a few calls and get you set up to at least take the initiation process. Thanks, but I already have someone willing to sponsor me. I just need to make a call tomorrow morning. No problem. Good talking with you, Naruto. Make sure you get some sleep, Tai said before heading to bed. Naruto nodded, returning to his room shortly after. He had a lot to consider given everything he'd been through. While the act of attending one of the Huntsman Academies had never been of great interest to him, knowing it might be pivotal to finding himself a way home gave it more precedence to him than it had before. It would be a major commitment unto itself. 4 straight years of study, not to mention any further years following should he be unable to find the answers he sought at Beacon. Still, it would give him something to work with. A foundation of sorts and certainly not one that could be understated. Well boys, looks like we're headed back to school. Oh joy, Kurama grumbled, earning a chuckle from Naruto as he drifted off to sleep. What if Ruby watched Naruto vs Sasuke final battle? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel. And leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.